Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Knights of the Last Call. My name is Derek Melenda, joining you today with a very special guest. I am joined by our patron and a recent patron within the last couple of months and new friend, Level 2 Janitor. Level 2 Janitor, welcome to the channel.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I've been looking forward to this for ever since you brought up the idea. I'm still a little surprised that I ended up on here. This is my big break.
There you go. Yeah, well, if your big break is Knights of the Last Call, you know, I hate to break it to you, but you may be still waiting. Welcome, everyone. So
I'll take it.
So what we're doing here today, basically, is we have this month been having a lot of guests on, including some independent RPG. Like obviously we had Luke Crane and Tor Olvesrud on earlier, but we also had Tundalus talking about Trespasser. We've got today Level 2 Janitor talking about their game, Tactiquest. And this kind of came up as because I think, Jan, I think you were sharing art, I think, originally, right? On the Patreon.
I joined your server as a patron, and Ben A immediately like noticed my itch link in my bio, and it was like, oh, what's this? Oh, you make games? Oh, let me just look through. And that is what every creative like wants to hear as soon as they walk into a place. It's like, oh, let me look at your stuff. So thank you so much to Ben for that.
Yeah, and Ben is kind of the sponsor of today's show. Ben, we had a tip goal to say, like, let's get more independent designers on, and Ben came in, slammed down a big tip, and said, I want to see Tactiquest. So Ben, this is for you. But also, I think it's really interesting because I think the indie design space. I mean, if you know, once upon a time, Shadow Dark was indie. You know, Dungeon World was indie. Powered by the Apocalypse are indie, and now they're kind of become cornerstones of the gaming sphere. And so I think it's important to remember that not every game has to come out of some big, huge production studio or corporation. And some of the best games come out of, are coming out of itch, basically.
Thank you so much. Also just big thanks again to Ben for that. I would not be here if it weren't for him. So
Well, you know, a lot of people could say that about Ben, so we'll say that.
Great guy.
Yes, he's amazing. All right, real quick. Jonas says, level to gender. I hope the stream runs long. I have to head out and we'll miss the beginning. Really digging Tactiquest from what I have seen so far. Thank you, Jonas. Mark T is complaining, of course, about my title, which was just descriptive and telling you what Tactiquest was. So apologize. Kofi says, yeah, but that's the creator's own game, artwork, and name, though. And I think that's an important thing to note. If you came in today, you saw the thumbnail.
Yeah, that's I do all my own art, mostly. There's a couple there's a character sheet. It's not quite done yet. That isn't mine. I can't do graphic design for shit. But I that and the cover, I did draw the cover, but I'm hoping to get get it done up nice and fancy with by like a more professional artist than me. The rest of the art is just gonna stay my like pencil sketches, though.
I mean, I think I'm a big fan of JP Couvert. I don't know if you've watched his channel.
I think you've mentioned him a couple of times on your stream, but that's where I know him from.
Yeah, so he just has a very a very simple cartoon style, very graphic really style, cool. Lean down style, and I think it looks really great. I mean, I think having your own style is important, and rather than just trying to be like generic Wayne Reynolds-esque wannabe. And so one of the things that I right away, I love the pencil sketching style. Obviously it would be cool to see it inked and colored, but I just think it gives me strong SNES Super Mario World vibes. That's what I get off of it.
Old Final Fantasy games and like old Mega Man art are where like 90% of my style comes from. You know how like I think so if you look at like an old Final Fantasy game, like
define old,
the NES, like NES or Super Nintendo.
Okay.
Older than 7.
Okay.
If you look at those, you'll see like they have these very cutesy like little 2-dimensional sprites, but those weren't what the artists were like going for at all. If you look at the official art, it looks nothing like those like cute little sprites.
Right.
But as a kid playing those games, I only ever saw the sprites. I never saw like the
the full like the character art. Sketches. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with like the you look at a character and it's like they have this adorable little chibi sprite, and then their like little face portrait in the game doesn't look like that at all, and then the official art doesn't look like either of them.
Right. Yeah, but I mean, I've said this before. I mean, that was a huge part of me. I mean, growing up, Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, Final Fantasy 3, aka Final Fantasy 4, aka Final Fantasy 6. Were huge parts of me, of my gaming journey. Dragon Quest, Dragon Warrior, it was called at the time. And so I love for that style and for that kind of game. I just can't help myself. I do love that kind of style and art of games. So, So today mostly is going to be us talking about Tactiquest. Now, when Jan joined and we were talking about it originally, I downloaded their game from itch and I took a look at it and just did a kind of a quick once over. So this isn't necessarily a first look, but I do. Before we begin, I want to read from your itch page, which I do have a link to below that'll take you over to if you want to go over to Tactiquest and you want to pick it up. You can go ahead.
Put the itch page in the description if it's not okay. It's there.
Yeah. I put it down there, so you can head over there if you want to download this and heck, you could do it. So you can read through it as we're going through it. So I do want to read this real quick. This is the bullet points. These are in the description of the YouTube video, which is Tactiquest is a tactical combat TTRPG with the following design goals. Now, before we go any further, I just already, when you come out and you say, this is what this game is, and these are exactly what I want to do with it, like this, when you're an indie developer, you have to, you can't just be like, I want to be everything to everyone. I just don't think that's works.
Oh yeah.
So
I don't envy like the position that like Wizards of the Coast is in, where they're like, oh, we have to make the new edition of D&D and it has to be everything to everyone and to please all our shareholders.
Right. Exactly.
And no matter what we do, there's going to be some like contingent of the internet going, this isn't D&D. Change it, make it different. And,
right. Exactly. So
why'd you change it?
you highlight 6 bullet points, and I think this is important to sort of discuss because, of course, this being kind of a first look, as always, I'm asking myself, what is this game about? Do the mechanics of the game support what the game is about? And then are the reward systems in place to make you feel like you are doing the right thing if you do the thing? So, strategic, fast-paced fights with no wasted turns and no stuns, meaning time spent on fights is boiled down to interesting decisions and impactful abilities rather than waiting for a good die roll to land a hit or shrug off being stunned. Now,
yeah,
obviously, this is something that I have ranted about on this channel before.
It's a lot of the solutions to this problem like have obvious downsides, and that's why a lot of people go, oh, well, you can't just like make every attack land and always work. That, because there are obvious downsides to that. But, there are enough upsides to it as well that this system started as me just experimenting like, fuck it, what if I just went no dice, everything you do always works.
Right.
And initially before I got to playtest it, I was like expecting it to kind of suck and expecting to have to be like, okay, well, no, your attack deals a d6 damage, but it auto hits because you got to have a dice in there somewhere. But no, it works fine, at least from my perspective. So at least it's got that going for it.
Torn, I am actually not in the I'm not actually in the thing yet. I am actually on level 2 janitor's itch page.
There we go.
So I'll just bring that up. So this is what we're doing here. Okay. So obviously just we'll get into this, but I'll simply say this. Growing up, I played a lot of board games. And then as I got older, I played a lot of board games. And I grew up playing board games like, Monopoly or whatever like that, where you roll dice and the whole game was about rolling dice. And then I started playing in the late 90s games like Settlers of Catan. And Settlers of Catan was great, but Settlers of Catan still had this problem where, depending on how the dice rolled, it might come around to your turn, and you'd look at your hand, and you didn't have any resources, or you didn't have the right kind of resources, and you basically couldn't do anything. And
make all the right decisions, and the dice will still screw you over.
Correct. And to be fair, randomness is a factor, and I appreciate that. But at the same time, I'm playing a game to make interesting decisions for me, and that's why when games came out like the Uwe Rosenberg styles of games, these are the Agricolas, Cavernas, Le Havres. That game, there is no random element, right? You take your turn, you put your worker on one of the action spaces, and you do the action. So it's not about will I be able to do a thing? It's choosing the right thing at the right time. And I like that.
That's what I was going for with this. Is I don't find it that interesting to like make decisions without that assurance that they'll matter, if that makes sense. I don't think it adds that much to a game to like have a die roll to see whether I miss my turn or not. I do think there's upsides to that. For one thing, obviously, like the thing everyone brings up when they see this game as diceless is like, oh, but dice are so good at creating like drama and tension and like uncertainty, and they are great at those things, and that's something that Tactiquest is kind of on purpose. That's something that I was willing to give up just to like experiment and see and try out a different style of game. So this isn't, it's not trying to be, your D&D that you play for the rest of your life and never play any other F20 games, because you're gonna go, oh, I miss having dice.
But like you said, you're not trying to be everything to everyone. Yeah. You're trying to, and that means
what it gains from that is the thing about like when your action will work outside of like edge cases where like it's specifically resisted by this enemy for whatever reason, it really enhances your ability to plan ahead with the assurance that like your plan is going to go off how you want it to, outside of like being disrupted by enemies trying to get their own strategy working and disrupt yours. Instead of just having like a chance to do nothing tacked onto every turn.
Well, okay, I don't want to go off on a rant here, but we just got a super chat from Tundalus. Tundalus, of course, was on not that long ago for their Trespasser game. Thank you for coming on, Janitor. First thought reading was any inspiration from Into the Breach. a real gem as far as determinative, non-random tactics goes. I don't know Into the Breach.
I still need to play Into the Breach, but I've heard things about it, and I understand why Tactiquest reminds people of that. There are plenty of video games that inspired Tactiquest, and I also think that most video games should not have fucking like random missed attacks. I don't think most like turn-based RPGs benefit from that, and that's
Ooh, that's a hot take.
I fucking hate missed attacks in a video game. Like in a tabletop game, you're playing with other players. You want to create like drama and have a story to tell. In a video game, you're just playing by yourself. You're trying to make a strategy work, but the game's like, oh, you got your 3% chance to miss, and now you have to redo your whole plan.
Right.
And, I don't think that adds more than it takes away.
Yeah, again, and I only think obviously I'm kind of on the fence. I do like dice, but the board games that I have been really loving the last X number of years, last 10, 15 years, have really been board games that have, like, if there is randomness, it's kind of like randomness to everybody. Like, what new action space will come out this round, right?
Yeah, I like that.
And so it kind of affects us all evenly, rather than being like, and in fact, in a way, it's a form of like input randomness instead of output randomness.
Yeah, I like randomness to set up situations, not to resolve them.
Yes,
I think that.
Yeah,
I think that's like word for word stated in the game. Somewhere.
It does. So it is. It's like the fourth one. So that's the first thing. Number one, no wasted turns, no stun, fast-paced fights. Number two, a wide variety of flavorful and focused character classes designed to capture specific, compelling fantasies and feel wildly distinct from each other. So class-based. Three, a mostly diceless approach that brings player input to the forefront, using dice only to set up situations, never to resolve them.
It's right there.
It's right there. So at least you're consistent with your messaging and branding. And again,
I also want to interrupt.
Yeah, please.
I want to answer Sketchosaurus Rex. Would you mind me inking and coloring your art? I would love that. Everyone has like free reign to do that as much as they want. That would make me super happy.
which is kind of funny, because that's, remember what I said when I said I love your art. I was like, I mean, obviously it'd be cool to see it inked and colored.
that would be super cool.
I would
love that.
Awesome. 4, an emphasis on resource management and attrition, tuned to fit the pace of a typical campaign. Now, I was not expecting to see this in there. And, because, by the way, before we get in, you should know that Level 2 Janitor with Tactiquest is, unlike a lot of RPGs, which are kind of ashamed to admit the dirty secret, which is they're like, actually, this game is kind of just all about combat, right? Like, and everybody knows that it is. And like, let's be honest with ourselves, it is for most people. And, you're like, but wait a second, 89% of the book is about combat feats, combat spells, combat abilities. All the class features are about combat. What do you mean this game isn't about combat? You are very forefront that in Tactiquest, combat is at the forefront.
It's not the only, there are explicitly like classes that are specialized in non-combat stuff, and I want to make that work. But it's still like 80% about combat.
Yeah. So resource management and attrition is usually something we kind of sort of associate maybe more with like a combat as war style game, as opposed to like a more combat as sport type game, right? Where it's like
that's something so this game is not billed as an OSR game, right?
Okay.
I didn't put anywhere marketed on that.
No. You said your primary inspiration from a D&D perspective was 3rd edition and 4th edition.
Basically, yeah. But also, I'm like, outside of this game, I'm mostly an OSR person. I like more combat as war games. I like, more lightweight, knave type of games. That's most of my experience. And this game was like partially an experiment to see if I could like mix some of that like 4E/OSR thing. But I didn't want to market it as that, because I felt that would give a very skewed impression of what the game is about, because it's not an OSR game, but it does have a lot of influence from specifically, I want this to be a sandbox game.
Right. And that's your 5th point. Player-driven sandbox campaigns designed to facilitate exploration and setting your own goals. And most people associate that with OSR, basically.
Yeah, and that's the part of like OSR as a genre that I felt would mesh best with like this like combat as sport, grid-based square counting game. And that's a huge part of like what I like in games.
And then
also,
oh, sorry.
I hope it's not. I hope I'm not being too disruptive when
Nope.
I like. I'm going to be like responding to chat a lot because I have a lot of things to say.
That's all right.
Yeah,
just call me out, call it out, and I'll tag it. I just want to get this last one. And then the last one is a buffet of evocative and interesting monsters who are easy to run while providing a more interesting challenge and simple bags of hit
I
points.
hope I get to talk about the monster design at some point before we have to like end a stream. Let's see. Beowulf, I'm a big roll to hit proponent, so I'm very interested to see if this can sway me at all. It won't. If you like roll to hit, then I can't cure you. Sorry. There's nothing I can do for you. It's terminal.
I don't want to get off on too much of a tangent here, but here's this is interesting. And I say this because in theory, I'm supposed to be going to Las Vegas here soon. Obviously, we've had a lot of chaotic, and some life events that have happened that may throw that in the plan. But what is interesting to me is people a lot of times say like, well, Derek, what do you like about Vegas? And I said, well, when I go to Vegas, I like to play games that require no skill. I like to play games.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to play blackjack or poker.
It's the gambling itself that's the appeal. It's not the idea that you could like win.
Correct. It's not the idea that I could win. I just like the random chance. And so this is what's very interesting to me. The more decision points a game has, the less likely or the less I like randomness. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I play like an old school game, like I'm talking about a BX D&D, where your character you don't have any special abilities. You're literally swinging your sword against the orc, and it's really just kind of let's just keep rolling dice to see who's living and who's dying at the end of this. Like there's no real, game to Jenga. I'm okay just rolling dice. And and just being like, because like, what's my plan here? There's nothing more complex in this game than they have an armor class, I have a to hit roll, and we're rolling to see who kills who. And in that way, it feels like a slot machine to me,
Yeah, I get that. I gotta say,
we got a big tip coming in from Sunhawk.
Thank you.
$50.
Sunhawk tipped $50. Yay, more indie.
That was our tip goal. Hooray for indie games. And Sunhawk with $50 says, hooray, yay for more indie. Sunhawk, thank you so much for supporting this and supporting this game. Thank you.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, Sunhawk.
That's not what I like about OSR games.
Okay, that's interesting.
I think there's like kind of two different approaches you can take to like an old school D&D game, where it's like, on the one hand, you can play it like a hack and slash game where you run in, you roll dice, kill monsters, and you get killed because that's how the math works out.
Right. Well, eventually, right? Like
D&D.
the even if the odds are in your favor, they're not so in your favor that you're going to survive that over multiple encounters. Yeah.
Yeah, like 20% chance to die. If you do 5 fights, you're going to die.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And the other possible approach to an OSR game is you go out of your way to not get killed, because that's the fun, is like going out of your way to minimize risk and to like pick your battles very carefully. Because if you depending on your GM and your like group, you can play it like an OSR game that has very lethal combat, but still like have a character live for like a long time if you're playing very carefully and clever. And funny thing.
Yeah, so please, yeah.
You go first.
Yeah, so I was gonna say so for me, it's not I don't necessarily like the combat in old school games. I like that it's quick and it's over. I just like that. What I'm saying is like the more decision points that a game introduces, like, and this is gonna sound kind of cheap, but it's true. When the only thing I can do is basically swing my sword, then if I miss on my attack roll, I don't care. But when you set me up in, let's say, 5e or Pathfinder 2 or even D&D 4e, and you give me this really cool, fun, exciting power that I'm really excited to use, and then it's predicated on me having a 50-50 or whatever 60-40 chance of hitting, then it does two things to me. One, it obviously sets me up for disappointment. But two, it also puts into my brain this overwhelming desire to try to maximize my odds so that I can hit, because I want that thing that is so cool to happen. And it sort of changes the predicate, of how I interface with the game a bit.
Yeah, exactly. What was I going to say first? I can't remember.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Maybe next time I shouldn't let you go first because I'll just forget.
That's all right. Yeah, please interrupt me. I talk on this thing all the time. So,
all
right. So I brought up the PDF. So we're not going to.
Oh, that's. I hope. Is there like a big blank space above that? Art, or is it just me?
I mean, it's the table of contents.
Oh, okay. That's on the top page. I was worried that my formatting got fucked up and I published the book without noticing.
No. This is the top of the page. That was just bottom of page 2.
Oh, good. Okay.
So real quick, table of contents. We have, and of course, obviously, remember, this is sort of a work in progress. So we've got introductions about what is expected of you and the GM, some stuff about time, tracking time, information how to resolve skills, character creation, your different character types, human, dwarf, elf, goblin, orc, naga, ? Then we have a bunch of character classes. And then we have information about equipment, gear, our inventory, spellcasting, resting, and healing. A good couple of pages and sections on combat. And then we also talk about GMing, crafting, exploration, hex crawl. And then lastly, we get a list of inspirations and credits. There's also a bestiary that comes with the itch purchase. So make sure you click on the link, throw level 2, $6, I think, is the recommended. You could do better than that. And then
I will say, if you're looking at this and Derek's saying, throw him a few bucks, like you can just take the game. It's fine if you don't pay me. I'd rather you play it than like go, I'll buy it later. And then
we pay money to people we support around here, people. Make
yeah.
Sure.
But like, if someone downloads it for free and they talk about it, that probably gets me a sale anyway. So,
right.
you can pay me that way if you want.
Or pay you the $6, download it, play it, and talk about it anyways. That's
the best case scenario.
That should be the only case scenario. Okay.
Don't feel obligated.
So introduction. We have a basic introduction of who you are and what you are in this game. We've got, you're a traveler, you're a scoundrel, you're a no good, not a no good, but you're down on your luck a little bit. There's a lot of it's a trouble-plagued world, but there's adventures to be had. And again, you might be an aspiring hero or just trying to find your next meal. Either way, you lead an eventful life. So, you're not, you're an adventurer. Basically.
One of the things that I wanted to do with this system is, I kind of hate the tone where it's like, there's a lot of like inspiration from like 4th edition in this game. One of the things I don't like about 4th edition is how heavy it leans into like the, you're a big damn hero, like capital I important person. And I hate that. I hate that so much.
So you like being kind of you like being that's kind of an OSR, right? I mean, I'm assuming.
Like I said, this is why I mostly run like OSR games. This game exists because I was playing OSR games for like a couple years, and then I was like, man, I really miss like when my players just got into a fight like for the sake of it.
Right. You don't always have to be a big damn hero. I mean that's we're going through that with our Torchbearer game, right? In Torchbearer, you start off as kind of a penniless nobody. You're not necessarily
I like that.
You're not necessarily a criminal, but you kind of, you're on your own and you don't really
you're not a big important person. And
right.
That solves a lot of world building problems, if that makes sense.
Sure. All right, so how does it play? So we've got diceless resolution. Unlike most tabletop RPGs, success or failure is never determined by a dice roll. No randomness gives players a clearer understanding of their actions and enhances their ability to plan ahead. Less emphasis on luck and more on careful planning and strategy. Dice are still often used, but only to set up situation, never to resolve them. Players' decisions ultimately determine their fates, not the whims of a die roll. So, big damn important stuff. Fast tactical battles. Combat is a big focus of this game, taking up a large chunk of the world. Rules: no wasted turns, no stuns, keeps the battle moving, keeping the emphasis on positioning, teamwork, and tactics. And I think those 3 things that you highlight there are, for me, sort of the defining characteristic of what makes a good grid-based game. which is positioning, teamwork, and tactics. Yeah. Because I feel like some games handle the teamwork aspect better than others. Pathfinder 2, I think, does a pretty good job of handling the teamwork part of it. Tactics, yes and no. I mean, it really depends on the game. Like a great example of a game I think that handles tactics really well is Fabula Ultima, because in Fabula Ultima, the ability to target the right defense or target the right elemental energy on a monster is a huge deal. So if you could plan
your setup situation,
you want to set up exactly.
Yeah.
But positioning is the one I think people lose a lot on. A lot of games go flanking.
I remember,
and they go, that's it.
So I was one of the things that I was reading Fabula Ultima, like you pointed out, and I was pretty interested in it. But one of the things that disappointed me about it was I was reading it, and it mentions like, okay, abstract positioning, you can usually get to where you need to, and then it has a section where it's like, oh, but wait, sometimes positioning is important. You might have like a sniper on a tower, or someone casts a spell that opens up a big fissure, and when that happens, you figure it out.
Yeah.
That disappointed me. That's not a helpful answer.
Now, I will say,
no offense to Fabula Ultima.
No.
It's a good game.
Every game is different, and it definitely takes a very abstract approach to the combat and relies on the GM to sort of adjudicate it.
Because I actually like the idea of like, no, you can always get where you want unless there's some extenuating circumstance. I think if you're trying to design a game where like you are constantly having dramatic things happen, that's a good design philosophy. So good on Fabula Ultima there.
I will say, while I am totally on board I love 4th edition D&D, I will say that Beowulf and I both have a shared deep, I don't want to call it obsession, but it's a dream. It's a pipe dream of creating a very tactical RPG that is not grid-based. And a lot of people go, so you mean zones? And I go, no, not zones, because zones are just big grids. I mean, I'm not saying zones are bad, but I mean, zones are just big grids. I mean, if you can,
I like range bands like 13th Age. I actually like those better than grids.
Okay.
I've played. Grids felt better for this system.
Yeah, and I've played a couple 13th Age games, and they were fun and they were okay, but it did rely on a lot of little kind of soft things. And even then,
I like playing without a grid with range bands.
Yeah,
I hate playing without a map. I hate when the game is. I hate when it's like, just because when there's no map, I can't visualize like positions very well in my head.
Yeah, and to go back to something, and you make a great point. We're only on page 2-3 here. But like no, but like when I run a Theater of the Mind based game, it's usually in a game that doesn't necessarily have a lot of tactics, positioning, or teamwork, right? And so it works really well because I don't need to map, because there's nothing really to map. I mean, we're just kind of describing things, and the orcs are swarming down the hallway, and there's axes banging against shields, and it's a gritty push and roll your die, and then we're not really trying to like strategically plant.
Not a lot of opportunities for strategic decisions.
Even when we played 13th Age, we oftentimes used miniatures, just no grid, and we would just kind of eyeball it.
That's my ideal middle ground.
Yeah. And so, if your mini was on the other side of the map from the other, the other monster, you'd be like, they're not nearby, they're far away. You would just kind of eyeball it, and you didn't really rely on precise. Like, but again, it relies obviously on a certain level of trust as well. Now, Sketchosaurus says hex based. Yes, obviously, I prefer hexes to grids, but I'm crazy like that.
This game, it probably would be better if you played it with hexbat maps. I think hex maps are better designed, but I went with square maps because it's a fucking pain in the ass to make hex maps.
I know. Well, one, it's a pain in the ass. Number two, everything supports grids. Nothing supports hexes. Number three, people always go, but what about square rooms and rectangular rooms? All right, fair enough. But again, Gloomhaven uses hexes, so they figured it out.
As someone who would complain about the square room thing, I know I'm a hypocrite for doing it because I do plenty of circular arenas in my square grid game, and it's like, well, why is everything shaped like a, why is everything made of squares when this is a circular? It's the same problem, just in the opposite direction.
Correct. I don't want to get off on a hex and a grid thing. I will just say two things. One, hexes solve the square problem of the diagonal movement.
Diagonals.
Right. That's the biggest one. And the second one that is really nice is it also makes it really easy to actually create a even AoE that doesn't have weird corners. So, if you have a AoE that targets one hex and then targets all adjacent hexes, so you have like a little blast template for a fireball or something like that, or two, just go out 2 hexes and then you make a template. You have a roughly circular explosion, but it's actually, you don't have to have like weird geometry and calculus to calculate, or need to have like a pre-printed out template in order to figure out what you're doing with it. So those are like 2 of the main, I think, advantages. Let me see here. Another thing here is David says the fight rules in Burning Wheel are highly tactical without a grid. David, I'm running Torchbearer, which uses a derivative of the fight rules for its combat or for its conflict system, right? Where you use the 3 different cards, which are either attack, defend, feint, or maneuver. And we are finding it to be very tactical. It's initially very easy to dismiss it as like rock, paper, scissors, but we are actually finding that. So I actually agree with you on that one. All right. Tactical battles, dangerous journeys is where we talked about the resource management. Long sandbox campaigns. Tactiquest shines in games of at least 10 sessions, giving players time to take on objectives at their own pace, slowly growing in power. This also allows some systems like crafting and classes that interact with these systems to work as intended. So no one shots.
One shots work. There's just like don't play a ranger or a merchant class in a one shot, because you're not gonna get the most out of that class.
I think and I think there's a lot of people here who would say, I'm not a big one shot fan myself. I like to let the game systems breathe. It's
a little awkward because one shots are like a really nice way to just try out a game. And if you do that with Tactiquest, you're not quite getting like the intended experience. But who knows? Maybe I'll figure out a way to make it work at some point.
All right. So here we go. We're going to the hot takes. So we're definitely going to give some space here after I read this paragraph. So this is the first hot take. Okay. Which, spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure I either completely agree with this or completely disagree with this. So design goals, decisions before drama. Plenty of TTRPGs focus on telling a dramatic, moving story as their highest priority. While a Tactiquest campaign might give you a fun story to tell, an engaging narrative is secondary to giving players meaningful choices. Watching someone else's plan go off without a hitch can be boring. You watch a heist movie to see how plans go awry. Ensuring your plan goes off without a hitch may not be the best story to tell, but it makes a better game to play.
I don't even 100% agree with this, but Tactiquest 100% agrees with it.
Okay. Yeah, no. Listen, I
have games I will play if I, want, a dramatic story game, right? This isn't one of them.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack here, but basically what you're saying here is that, this is more about the tactical element, right? Like it's more about the decision making rather than worrying about, does this create a compelling and interesting narrative? So you are willing to sacrifice in this game, the sort of the level of quality, if you will, of the narrative, if it means that people get to make more meaningful choices.
Yeah, it's a trade-off. Yeah. It's not the trade-off every game should make, but it's the one I decided to go with for this game, because this game was kind of an experiment to see how far I could take that.
And I think, and I think the thing that really stands out to me, because we talk about this all the time. In fact, Beowulf, who's in chat, we often clash because, I think role-playing games are games, and he thinks role-playing games are role-playing. This game seems to be really saying that, I'm willing to sacrifice these other elements that so many people attribute to role-playing games because I want to make a better game.
It's you can still tell fun stories in this game. It's just,
that's not your primary objective.
Yeah. There are no like narrative mechanics. There's
Correct.
no like there's no meta currency that rewards you for like, oh, I played into one of my convictions this session, so I get a a story point
Right.
or whatever.
Correct.
And nothing against those mechanics.
Correct. And here's the thing. I love the idea of that, right? Of leaning into player choices. This is what I want. This is what I want out of a game, is meaningful choices that I get to make. But the reason why I say I completely disagree with it is because I play role-playing games to create drama, right? So like it's this weird kind of like it's this weird tension.
It's definitely something that works best, probably as like not your full-time play this every single session kind of game. That makes sense.
Yeah. Because see, here's what's interesting. So Beowulf says, ensuring your plan goes off without a hitch is awesome. Here's the problem. I don't think it is. That's just like, I know that people like.
That's an OSR. You can see.
Yeah, it's very much an OSR-ism. I don't want, you guys covered every eventuality and you just win and there's no drama and there's no tension and you just did it. Right. Like, I'm like, why do I want that? Like, that's what I want for, I don't know, my job. Hey, you tackled this project. There were no hidden complications. You thought of everything in advance. You well planned it out and executed it, and you finished on time, and you didn't go over budget. I'm like, great. That is what I want for my day-to-day life. I want simple, easy, dependable, reliable. I don't know that that's what I want for my game.
Oh yeah, So I'm gonna. So there was an example you gave in like I think another. I can't remember which one it was, but. Where I mentioned Tactical Infinity and you brought up an example of like if you're playing a Pathfinder 2 game and you go to all the like 20th level good aligned NPCs and have them solve the problem, that is the smartest thing you can do.
Right.
And that's why this game makes you play an underdog. That's why you have the bit in the beginning that says like, hey, you're not a fucking like big damn hero. You're just scraping by. Because if you were a big damn hero, then the best thing to do would be to use your resources and influence to have someone smarter and better solve the problem. And I hate that.
Absolutely. All right, so next, more game, less load. Choices in character building, combat, and narrative often come at a cost of complexity. Well said. You need more moving parts to create more compelling choices, more levers for players to pull, which increases the time and brain space. We often talk about, player CPU and player RAM. It costs to remember and run the rules. Tactiquest aims to get more game, more decisions out of fewer rules, less time spent, less hassle. Turn 2 roles into 1 role into none. Cut superfluous extra steps, all meat, no fat. And while the end is still a pretty hefty tome of text, every rule serves a purpose. So we're really talking here about elegance of design, right? And you're willing to make a sacrifice of depth of play if it means that you come up with a more elegant game. Is what I'm reading this as.
Sort of, yeah. This game is probably less deep than like 4th edition or Pathfinder 2.
Right.
But hopefully you get more depth out of per like you get more juice per squeeze.
You get
hopefully.
You might
At
get
least that was the intent.
Yeah, right. You might get
my own horn a little.
No. You might get less juice. But you're getting a ton of juice for the squeeze. That's like the goal.
That is the goal.
Okay.
I don't know how well I executed that, but I hope that was the goal.
So lastly, short and sweet character builds. Classic fantasy archetypes, grizzled fighters, scholarly sorcerers to more oddball options. Each classes filling a similar role will feel distinct in play. It was also a goal of classes to have a small set of punchy, impactful abilities that change the dynamic of the game when used, rather than a wide pool of scattered +1s and underwhelming situational abilities. Shots fired. Characters shouldn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes to build, even for a new player.
There are some classes where I indulge in the complexity a little more than where I indulge in like the same complexity I'm complaining about in this paragraph.
Got it.
But most of them are pretty simple. The bit about like I want like a small amount of like big impactful abilities. I think that's more rewarding.
100% agree. And I've said this before when 5th edition D&D came out. Smith and I really liked the feats that like gave you like a whole new suite of abilities or a whole new way to approach the game, rather than the ones that everybody took, which was just like, this gives you 3 rerolls.
Oh yeah, that's one of like 2 things that I like about 5th edition, and the other one I'll bring up if we get to the monster design.
All right. Player expectations. We'll just kind of quickly go through this, but ground yourself in the world. Ask your GM about the setting. Where are you from? How are you? Who have you fought against? What are the world's troubles? How do you interact with people? Think as a team. Don't just build yourself on a solo mission here. Be invested in other people's PCs. Align your goals with theirs. Share the spotlight. Take initiative. Be decisive. Scheme, conspire, collaborate, but do not get bogged down in debates. If the game's going nowhere, pick a plan and commit to it. So, as a player, these are great expectations, right? Hey,
thank you.
A lot, we have this game and this setting. We're playing a role-playing game. You should be thinking of ways to tie yourself to that campaign world. 2, you're here with other players. You should be thinking about them and their PCs as much as you think about yours. And lastly, shut up and do something. For lack of a better word.
I'm sure I'll find something else to fill out this second empty column at some point. It's not finished.
There we go.
This section is finished.
GM expectations. Fill a world with adventure. Straight out of Dungeon World, right? Which is your job is to fill the PC's lives with adventure. Create a world of secret strangers, schemes, problems to solve, monsters to fight or flee, dangerous dungeons, and enticing treasure. Adjudicate actions. The rules for most non-combat actions are loose and open to interpretation. This is deliberate. So it sounds like you're kind of saying ruling's not rules in
a little bit
outside of combat.
Yeah.
Okay.
The skill system we get to here, I'll talk about it once we get there. But yeah.
Okay. Enable player-driven sandboxings. Basically, encourage non-linearity. Tackle challenges, whatever they want. Don't railroad your PCs.
There's another bit in that paragraph.
Okay.
About not tailoring the world to suit your party, because that's like a bit of advice I see all the time. Is like, oh, you should if your party is all wizards, don't include then you should design your encounters so that that they're uniquely suited for a party of wizards that you wouldn't do if they had a fighter. And I don't like that advice. I think if a party if you end up with an oddball party, they should get to experience the same challenges that
absolutely
that a more balanced one would, because I think that makes it feel more authentic. Is that the right word?
No, yeah, no. They're okay. So I've talked about this a little bit before, but I've never really gone too deep into it. But there's a distinct reason why I, as a GM, enjoy using modules, and I use the term modules specifically.
Is it because they're they have that impartiality
where
everything is designed without knowing what party will tackle them, and that's something I like.
Yep, and it removes bias. And I remember, and Smith used to take this to an extreme degree, which is when he was prepping a 3rd edition campaign or whatever. He'd be like, I want to have most of the adventures written before you guys make characters, because I don't want to be biased. And I remember, there was an encounter in some adventure from 3rd edition, and the group, it was 2 dire wolves or something like that. And a nasty encounter. And the party had a druid, and the druid just cast charm animal. And the wolves, not only were the wolves basically instant death spells, right? In the sense that they were charmed, but then I was the wolves joined the party, I guess, they're your friends. They want to, and everyone's,
I love that kind of,
and everyone's, and everyone's like, well, what would have happened if we didn't have a druid? I was like, I don't know. It's a good thing you did. I didn't make this encounter. I wasn't I have a druid in the party. I should totally put an encounter with wolves in. No, that was just what some anonymous person who wrote that adventure put in there, and you all happen to have a druid. I love that. Yeah, I love that too. Yeah, so big fan.
There's I'm trying to remember what I was gonna say. Oh,
sorry.
Right. There's a bit later in the book that's just some guidance on party comp, and it's do whatever you want, but know that some oddball if you don't bring a balanced party, you're gonna have a lopsided experience. And if you're opting into that, then do it. Just know what you're getting into. And the only bit that says don't do this is you should have someone that deals damage. Don't bring a party of all bards that can't deal damage.
All right, hot seat. You're in the hot seat, janitor. Todd Twilley has a question, or more of a statement. Well, I guess it's a question. Players are telling you the game they want to play by their character choices. Why ignore them?
I think you should give them opportunities to use them, but I think that should arise naturally. The GM's job is to vary the situations they're throwing at the players enough that almost every character ability should come up at some point. But that shouldn't come from the GM like deliberately tailoring the game to their players. At least not like in the context of like what Tactiquest wants you to do. Ideally, there should be no character option you can pick that like will just never come up unless the GM makes it happen. And if there are, then I've kind of failed at that part of the design, and you should let me know so I can fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my response to that would simply be that if you as the GM are deciding whether or not their choices matter or not, you're sort of removed the impact of their choice.
Yeah,
and the whole point here is that
the fact that the world doesn't conform to their characters is what makes their choice matter.
Exactly. I agree. And it means that your choices are going to have consequences for good or for ill. And that's what's really important. If you make the party of all mages or whatever, or all near mages, and you fight a golem who is immune to magic, that is part of the consequence of your choice.
Yeah, it's that. And I think also another thing is the sandboxing helps with that. If players like want a specific thing out of the game and that comes through in their like character choices, they can seek it out because you aren't running a linear like adventure path where the players are like guided through a specific experience. They're just plopped into a world and told to pursue their goals. And because of that, sometimes it will create situations that you get a different experience than a balanced party would.
Right.
But it also means like if that creates like a catastrophic like mismatch for your party, you can fuck off and do something else in the world because it's a sandbox, and that's part of the appeal of sandboxes for me.
So you just hit exactly what I was going to say, which is the problem with that approach is that if you're thinking in a standard D&D, standard Pathfinder approach, right? The GM is saying this is the challenge and there is no other challenge. You have to go through this cave system to get to the next breadcrumb in the adventure as part of the adventure path. You have to fight all these giants because that's what the adventure is. And also I've even said before as a player, if you're playing in that kind of campaign, your GM bought that adventure, they're playing that adventure, you're actually kind of being a dick if you're like, oh, well, I don't want to go do that. I want to go start an inn in Absalom. And it's like, well, no, we're playing Rise of the Rune Lords here. But the problem is when
this game does not support starting a local business.
Right.
That's not something I'm interested in enabling.
But if you're going to force people to go through these adventures or go through these situations, then that's on them. Or that's on you as the GM. But if the world is truly open, like if there is, if you're playing a game like old school 3rd edition where like rogues couldn't sneak attack undead and constructs. If you had a party with like 3 rogues and the party decided to go to the dungeon of undeads and constructs, then that's on them.
I really like the idea of like of your party comp like informing like, okay, which of these dungeons we can go to is going to be the easiest at our level.
I love that. I love that. Smith,
I also want to bring up
that's huge.
So one of the inspirations I mentioned Final Fantasy 1 specifically is like a big inspiration that I wanted to capture with this game because that's a game where like you start up the game and it's like, okay, make a party and you can go and there's 6 classes, you can have any combination you want. You can have 2 fighters and a thief and a black mage, or you can have 4 white mages, and the game is going to, and your choice does not like the game is not tailored to your choices, and your party composition can result in some parts of the game being drastically easier and some are drastically harder, depending on what you go with, especially if you pick some more like lopsided party compositions, and I fucking love that.
Yeah. And Nin, I agree with you. So Nin says, if I have to get past a magic immune construct in my all mage game, the GM is a dick. Hard pass, not my bag. That's not choice. That's a railroad that was very poorly designed. TPKs kill tables. I agree with you, Nin.
Good news.
If you
Good news. There's no TPKs in this game unless you're fighting undead. This game lets you like retreat at any time. If you lose combat, bad things happen, but you probably still survive. I don't like when a combat game is like, okay, you have to engage in combat all the time, but also if you lose combat, you die and the campaign's over.
Yes, it's a freaking Faustian deal when a game is like, hey, all we do is fight, and you're like, okay, but what happens if we lose, because we're going to be fighting a lot, right? And you're like, well, there's two options. Either the game is designed so that you can't actually really ever lose, even though we won't or you I
agree with Nin here in the context of like a more railroady D&D game.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because if you're forcing them to if you don't go through this golem, the campaign ends, I don't have anything else for you, and that's it. You have to go this way. Then that is a dick move. But if I am a GM and I have decided, oh, this is the Valley of the Lost Shrines, and it's guarded by a magical immune golem. Well, guess what? You don't have to go there. It's not like that's where the campaign is. The party might the party goes, we're not going there. We're going to go to the dungeon of all creatures are weak to magic missile. And we'll just waffle stomp them. That's our choice. If we want to if we want to explore the Valley of Lost Shrines, we're going to have to really go out of our way to think of a way to be, to get past that golem.
There's also like, there's also a big element of, I like preparation in terms of like, okay, you go scout out this dungeon. It turns out it has something super dangerous. And so you fuck off and you go like buy some, incredibly powerful scroll or potion, and you come back.
Yep.
And then you stomp whatever was giving you trouble with the thing that you bought.
Yep.
I love that stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, that if you looked at most of the games that we played from between say 2000 and 2008, 2009, my home groups, me, Smith, Tim, the boys, we would have these sessions that we called reconnaissance sessions. The mages and the clerics would all take divinations and arcane eyes and clairaudience, clairvoyances, and we would go into the dungeon or go into the area knowing that today wasn't going to be the day that we were going to be engaging. We were just gathering information.
There's a class in this game called the Oracle that is entirely about that, and that's its whole shtick.
Right.
And if you bring an Oracle, you are going to be doing a lot of like... It would be metagaming if you didn't have an in-world justification for it.
And I've talked about this before, but when we played our Pathfinder 1 dungeon, we had a guy who played a diviner, and he basically had all these different spells. And so what I used to do is send him a map of the dungeon without labels, but I would send him a map of the dungeon level offline, and he could review it as much as he wanted offline. But at the session, we didn't have any computers, and he couldn't bring a printout. So at the session, it was like his character had this kind of like sixth sense about things, because he could remember parts of the map, because he had to study it when he was off, when his wizard between adventures, he was casting divinations and trying to learn more about the thing.
One of the goals with this game was that like every class gives you a very specific toolbox, but hopefully each toolbox is like, hopefully all of the oddball toolboxes are impactful enough that like even when you're facing something that's that expects a balanced party, you can finagle a way around it with your with the very unusual tool set that you have.
All right, we got a tip coming in from Chase. Thank you, Chase. Chase says,
Chase H tipped $10. It has been a while since I've caught a live stream. Love the interviews with indie designers. Smile LV2 Janitor. What is your favorite part? The Tactiquest design and something you think needs some rework or polish.
That's okay. Yeah, it's because it only comes through on my end. It's one of the weaknesses of this setup, but unfortunately,
you can tell me if there's anything I need to know.
Yes, Chase says it's been a while since I caught a live stream. Love the interviews with indie designers. Level 2 Janitor. What is your favorite? I'll sec. I'm gonna run it again because I couldn't hear it. So hold on a sec.
Chase H tipped $10. It has been a while since I've caught a live stream. Love the interviews with indie designers. Smile LV2 Janitor. What is your favorite part? The Tactiquest design and something you think needs some rework or polish.
Chase wants to know, what is your favorite part of Tactiquest design, and what is an area that you think still needs a lot, some polish and some work?
My favorite thing to design is classes and monsters. I love doing that. What's my favorite part of the design is in like what I'm happiest with, probably also classes and monsters.
Okay.
What's something that needs a bit more polish? Most of the player expectation section above, that wasn't quite finished. There are also a bunch of like character classes that I'm not sure about the balance on, and they'll need a bunch of testing. So I'm just gonna keep this game in early access playtest version for like 5 years until I can reliably like set it down in front of some on the itch page and say, you can play this and no like class options are gonna break your game.
So let's get into some of the rules then, or some of the ideas here. So real quick, we use standard size dice. We round up.
And it says
we have exceptions.
Mostly used for helping the GM set up situations, which encounter tables and loot tables and similar.
Yep.
Dice are mostly only used for like meta randomness.
Some abilities give certain numbers a minimum that can't be lower than. Other abilities simply add on to that. Okay, they do not stack. Time. We have 1 minute, 1 scene, 1 watch, and then beyond that is like a day, week, or month.
Yeah.
So
this is mostly just like the stuff you need to know to make all of the like edge case rules make sense.
All right. So design note. Time. This game cares a lot about tracking time. It is a source of tension and resource management. You do not need a calendar, but you do need to know the week, the day, and how many watches have passed today. Your GM note should say something like week 1, day 1, watch 1 at the start of a campaign. Watches determine when the players run into encounters and how long certain spells last. Track the days since players have restocked at a settlement, because they can't do so again for a week. That's important. It puts pressure on the player's resources, a dynamic that drives the game as a whole.
Yep. It's a little fiddly for like a tactical combat game, but that's like the bit where like this is the OSR influence coming through.
Yes, exactly. And I completely agree with all of this. As a side note, there's a lot of side notes here, but like that I don't want to get into too much, but like one of the things that we always really took advantage of in 3rd edition D&D, and one of the reasons we avoided the 15-minute working day, adventure day,
because spells have durations, etc. Right?
Right. Spells have durations, but not just spells. My players would frequently, especially if they were going to like really take care of some business, they would go and buy higher level spells and scrolls and use those to get a really powerful buff that they otherwise couldn't cast.
I love that gameplay loop of like having this limited access to something a lot higher level than you can normally do through like scrolls and potions.
And so they would load up, they would spend a bunch of their gold on this, series of buffs that gave them pretty nice buffs, but were only going to last for the next, 5 hours or 8 hours. And they're like, okay, and today we're going to go tackle the Dark Crypt. And they would go in and they could go fight one fight and go back to town and rest, but then all their spells buff out. So they were like, we need to milk this for all it's worth, baby. We need to stay in this thing. Let's try to get 15 encounters, out of our money, because we made this investment in this expedition and we wanted to pay dividends. That always worked really, 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 really well for us.
Asking, why can't I restock at a settlement 3 days after the last time I restocked? Gameplay balance. It's not a satisfying answer. If I had a more diegetic like mechanic for this, I would go with it, because I love that shit. I don't like when stuff feels too like non-diegetic, gamey, etc. But it's a trade-off I had to make. It's part of the resource management gameplay, and it enables a lot. It's not something I'm completely happy with, but
I've been really impressed with
the things that it enables are worth more to me.
I've been really impressed with Torchbearer, because town is great, except town's really expensive, and so
that is also something that I wanted to emphasize is like a lot of like F20 games, even like low power OSR games, it's like, okay, you went on an adventure, now you have like
right
30,000 gold.
Right. And mundane costs are never an issue ever again.
Yeah. Right. And I hate that.
Me too.
I don't. And yeah, I want players to like, I want you to care about money. I want you to worry about money.
Yep.
I think one example that I like to use is like, I don't want the player to be like Batman, where you're like a billionaire as a side hobby. I want you to be like Spider-Man, where you're like doing your hero shit and also trying to pay bills on the side.
Yeah, I mean, like we've had a couple sessions of Torchbearer, and the groups are finally about to make their way back to town, and they're not entirely sure like if they're going to be able to buy rations and torches. You know, like it's like a trade-off. And so I like that, you know, I like that. Okay. Skills. Each PC gains multiple skills at character creation. A skill could be any mundane, non-combat, non-magic talent or hobby the PC has. So long list here. And it says the above skills are examples. Any skill of similar effect to be taken if the player thinks of one that's not on this list. So skills are just completely just make something up.
They're open-ended. It takes some player trust. You know, I think this list is like enough coverage that if like you pick something that's obviously too powerful, the GM can look at the list and go, no, that's not the same power level. You're obviously trying to.
I'm taking the skill role-playing games. That's the skill I'm taking. So task resolution. So here we go. When a PC attempts a task not covered by the rules, the GM rules whether they succeed based on the following criteria. If the PC doesn't have a skill that would help, they're as good as the task as an average untrained person would be. If they do have a skill or ability that would help, they're as good at the task as an expert would be. Thus, there's 3 possible outcomes. 1, the PC succeeds unambiguously, which should almost always happen if the PC has a relevant skill or gear. 2, you can't accomplish the task. Or 3, the PCs could succeed with the right gear, the specific knowledge, or other factor, and they will succeed if they obtain it. So, what we are basically getting here, for those of you who don't know, is this is the basic outcomes from a Powered by the Apocalypse roll, just without the dice roll, and instead relying on the GM's decision. But
I've actually never looked too deep into a Powered by the Apocalypse game.
Well,
what this is from is from the OSR games that I used to run, because I hated when I came up with the system for OSR games because I hate when something in an OSR game is like, you don't want to leave stuff up to chance in an OSR game, because, you know, if you need that in like a dangerous situation, if you need to leave something up to chance in a dangerous situation in an OSR game, you've kind of already lost, if that makes sense. And so I didn't want like your like baked in toolkit to have, you know, a failure chance baked in based on a random die roll, because, you know, you're like, oh, I've got a climbing skill, and so I try to climb to get away from these zombies that are about to eat me. Oh, I rolled a 1, get eaten by zombies. And I don't find that satisfying in a game where, you know, your character's life is often on the line. I want my tool set in an OSR game to be reliable. And because this game is diceless, I just took that system and reused it.
Yeah, and so, you know, Jake says this is very say yes or roll the dice without the rolling of the dice, and I agree. The distinction here is that it's say yes, or when we think about Powered by the Apocalypse, one of the things that you can do in Powered by the Apocalypse is if the PCs don't succeed, it means that they quote unquote failed. And I hate to use the term failed because that's not really what failure means in Powered by the Apocalypse. What failure means is in Powered by the Apocalypse is it means the GM gets to make a move, and the GM move sounds very formalized and mechanical, but really what it is it's just a formalized language of what good GMs do anyways. And one of the GM moves is tell them the cost or tell them the requirements and ask. And that is basically what that third bullet point is. You're basically saying, no, you can't pick through this lock, but if you could find some thieves' tools, you could get through it. All right. And I've told them now the requirements, and now they can go and deal with that.
Yeah, I don't know if I succeeded at this, but the intent was that this is a lot more robust than just telling the GM, figure it out. I'm hoping this is enough that like most GMs could, reliably use this system as often as they could reliably be like, okay, I'm going to ask for an acrobatics check or whatever in, a more skill-based game.
You can take a skill twice. If you take it twice and it applies to a twice taken skill applies to a task, not only do you succeed, but you do it with flair, with extra bonus, or with extra benefits.
Guess where I stole this from? Trespasser.
Oh, Trespasser.
Thanks, Tundalis. I hope you don't mind me.
I was gonna say, it kind of sounds like Sparks. Sparks. Yeah.
Yeah, Sparks from Trespasser.
Fantastic. I thought so, but I was like, you didn't make this game, but after Trespasser, did you?
No, but I added this part.
Oh, okay. This is all right. This is a new part. All right.
I've been looking for a way. I wanted the take twice mechanic because I like the idea of being able to double down on a skill.
Right.
But I hadn't figured out a way to make it work until I saw your stream about Trespasser, and I was like, hey, wait a second, that's pretty good. So I stole it.
Awesome. So those are your generic skills. Some skills represent knowledge. A player might use these by asking the GM what they know about a particular situation, or the GM might provide them with extra information, even if it is unprompted. And again, we talk about the different types of knowledge here, but I love the idea of, one of my big rants about Pathfinder 2 was having to make checks to see if you know anything. And it's like, knowing things is how you make better decisions, how you make interesting decisions, as opposed to just guessing. So I'm a big fan of. I should include
a little bit in it. I should include a little GM sidebar here that's just just tell them stuff, most of the time.
Right.
And skills are good for knowing stuff the GM wouldn't normally tell you, but what the GM would normally tell you should cover a lot.
Correct. I agree. I completely agree.
The art for this page, the social situations, is basically just to emphasize that it mostly boils down to bribing people.
Right, because as you say here, gameplay frequently involves players trying to persuade or negotiate with NPCs. The social situations have to include levers for you to PCs to pull with trade, trickery, or debate. This works best when the NPCs have set in stone traits that the PCs can work with. Give them desires, ambitions, fears, allegiances, habits, guilty pleasures, convictions, and ties to other NPCs. Let the PCs figure out this information and have the GM use it to inform which approaches work best on a given NPC. Yada, yada, yada. Bribe them and blackmail them. Bribe them and blackmail them is what it really comes down to. And because what your point is, and this gets back to, again, I know you're not a PBTA person, but the diplomacy move, the charisma move in Dungeon World is called parlay. And it says, when you have leverage on an NPC, you can blah, 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 blah. It doesn't let you just go up to
than this, actually.
It doesn't let you just come up to somebody and go, diplomacy, you will give us all we need and require, even though we don't have anything.
I got an 18 on my perception check. Yeah.
Oh, is that
I don't like that sort of I don't like social skills in D&D type games. That system you described from PBTA sounds like what this would have been if I had a PBTA game.
We've got foster doggies in the house. If you're in the Cleveland area and you want to adopt this big sweet big man, this is Kaz. He's a pity. Aww. He's a big man. Look at his big paws, and he's very sweet, huh? Aren't you very sweet? And this is a big puppy. And then I don't know where that puppy is. Oh, she went downstairs, and then the puppy tuppy is downstairs. Anyways, but yes, I completely agree with you. Player charisma.
I'm kind of surprised. I didn't expect you to like the social situation.
No, because here's the thing. I don't necessarily like, and you talk about this here, how eloquently a player could speak is much less important than the content of their words. Don't punish, people who are slow or inarticulate or whatever like that. Let the players describe their words in abstract terms rather than the PC speech matching the player's words exactly. I don't really care what you say. I just care about your intent and are you interacting with the fiction in a way that makes sense? That's all I care about. And
that's a big deal to me.
And so for me, if it's like, hey, I've got leverage over this play, I've got leverage on this the tavern. I know he's been working with the Thieves Guild. I'm going to be like, hey, give us the information we need, or we're going to tell the prince that you've been, whatever, for the Thieves Guild. That's it. Like, I don't need that to be in character. I don't need to know anything, but I want to see you interacting with the pieces of the fiction. And so, yeah, that works for me. That's all I want. I'm just saying, I don't necessarily think it's, a thing about how well you say something in character. And quite frankly, in real life, if you don't have leverage, there are very few people in real life who can just get something for nothing,
Yeah, I don't like when players are like, oh, well, I'm going to convince him with logic and reason. And it's like, that usually doesn't work in real life. Otherwise, the world would be a much smoother run place. It's like...
Tundalus thinks that player charisma is a mean term for it.
It probably is. If you have a better term,
yes,
I let me know. Because I probably like a better term. For that.
See, Beowulf wants his players to be, Shakespearean actors, who can speak in character, and then just based on the quality of their character role playing, then he'll set the position effect, and then there's rolling. And I don't really care any about that. In fact, I don't even need really people to speak in character. I don't really necessarily care about it or need it. Okay, and lastly, you say here, no skills will basically allow you to just like skip social interaction. You can't be like,
and those are not allowed. You can't take those as skills.
I intimidate them, right? I Decepticon them. You talk about how there might be auxiliary skills that help give you the information that you need to be able to figure out those levers, those knobs, which is great.
Yeah, and those I like.
Yes, I like that too.
We had a player in one of the OSR games I was running, where I was like testing out this skill system. We had a player with who was like, hey, can I play a baker who always has food on hand? And a couple of sessions, and I was like, okay, you're using this as a social skill. You need to spend a skill slot on cooking.
Is that? I think I saw cooking's in here. Yeah, cooking. Yeah. Always having I was like, why is this in here?
because if a player has cooking as a skill, how often is that going to come up? And what situations is it going to... It's for social situations, right? It's for softening people up with oh, well, here, have a snack I made. It's a little icebreaker.
Nin says, describe your sword swing. No, that wouldn't work. Your critical misses. Well, Nin, there's no dice rolls in this.
Here's my counterpoint. Telling a player to describe their sword swing doesn't present opportunities for strategic decisions. Unless that impacts the mechanics, but if there's a system for that, then sure. But
right, I would argue, right? I've said this before. Describing your sword swing is FBT. This is what we call fluffy bullshit time, because it's not really affecting anything. On the other hand, if you had a system where a character could swing their sword aggressively or defensively, and that had some sort of strategic consequence, then I would want people to describe that.
And here's the thing. I've run systems where you can be like, oh, well, I'm going to sweep through 2 targets. But the system tells you when you get to do that. You're like, oh, I'm going to spend a point to add this extra fictional thing, player to my attack. And then that's going to have a mechanical effect. But you don't get to do that without by just describing, by just adding it onto an attack by describing it. You spend a resource to do that. Or there's a rule for when it's Mighty Deeds from Dungeon Crawl Classics, where it's the rule doesn't say anytime you describe yourself doing a extra sword maneuver, you get it. It tells you when you roll X number on a die, then you get an extra maneuver. And it doesn't tell you what those maneuvers have to be. They're not picked from a list, but it does tell you when you get that. And that's the thing that makes that kind of fluffy bullshit time into a mechanic and not fluffy bullshit for me.
Right. And I'll further add to that, to add this, speaking of Dungeon World, remember the way to think about Powered by the Apocalypse is the moves trigger from events in the fiction, right? You can't actually go and do a move. It's just you and the GM are having a conversation about the fiction, and then the move triggers whether the GM or the player wants it to or not. Because the rules are basically intersecting and saying, now we care, the rules. It's almost like they're a third party arbiter. And the way that Parlay is written is it says, when you have leverage, blah, 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 blah. Well, hack and slash is written the same way. And this is something that a lot of people, been a lot of discussions about this online all the time, where it says, when you engage a foe in hand-to-hand combat, blah, 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 roll your strength and do damage to them. And the point of that is that they're like, well, if you go and you can't just go, I go and hack and slash the dragon, or I go and hack and slash the giant. You're like, no, you're not engaging them in equal terms and going toe to toe.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't trigger the move, right? You still have to establish in the fiction why you're able to do this thing.
This is making me like suddenly like get like PBTA games that I've never been super into. I'm like, oh, wait a second, that makes sense.
And so, you know, the classic example is, you know, this kind of also loops back into like Blades in the Dark, but like if there's a big dragon and you're like a character and you got like a sword, you're a medium-sized character with a medium-sized sword, and you go, well, I'm going to walk up to the dragon and I'm going to, you know, stab it through the heart. And you're like, okay, so I'm rolling I'm going to go roll hack and slash on it. And the GM says, no, that move doesn't even trigger. You know, you swing ineffectively at the dragon. Maybe you crack a scale, but it does nothing. And now the dragon's rearing back to breathe fire over you. What do you do? And you're like, well, wait a second. I have a sword. I can make attack rolls. It's like, no, that's not the way this move works. Now, if you went in there mounted on a horse or a dragon and you had a dragon slaying sword, right, the move might be exactly the same thing, but now it triggers.
That's pretty much, yeah. I'm surprised that I was kind of expecting you to look at the social and like skill rules and be like, oh, well, this is just asking the GM to make something up. But no, apparently this is how PBTA games.
Yeah, yes. Now, obviously, PBTA games do use a dice roll, but it's really more to decide who gets the ball. Is it the player or is it the GM? But it's not really to determine success or failure, is how I would describe it. And yes, Jake, I agree with you. I think PBTA and OSR have a lot more in common than people realize.
Absolutely.
For big time. All right. Character creation. You choose your creature type or creature type. So elf, human, dwarf, and a class. You gain all the abilities for your class and creature type, except for perks, which are marked with a triangle.
Perks are basically feats.
Feats. Okay, great. Perks. You gain 2 perks from the options listed under your class and creature type. If you give up these 2 perks, you can multi-class and you can start with a second class. So I guess that would mean that you would start with all the abilities of the second class, but none of the perks.
Not exactly. It goes into detail in the section that is like cross-referenced there.
Got it. Note your hit points grade based on the grade you get from your class. 10, 12, 14, 16, or 18. This is how much damage you could take in a battle before being knocked unconscious. Various abilities and effects, such as first aid, can restore hit points, but most of them also increase your strain, as your body can only take so much healing before needing a rest. All right, full stop. This is a great solution to healing surges are dumb. I hate them.
It's for healing surges.
You just flip, you flip it around.
Yeah, but it counts up instead of down.
It counts up instead of down. And you know what?
For a lot of people, they're going to be like, "Oh, that's more immersive." And for me, I'm like, healing surges are just fine and immersive for me.
Healing surges work. Healing surges work great for me, but there are so many people out there who are like, "Oh, I get it." You know, the cleric's
once you flip it around.
Yeah, the cleric's magic flows through me. My wounds heal, my bones knit together through the divine touch. But that's still like that's draining
your body.
Yeah, it's straining my body with this unnatural healing.
You know, being chopped up and healed over and over again is gonna take a toll on you.
Exactly.
And at some point you're gonna be like, oh gosh, this is awful.
And already just like that, there are so many people who rail against healing surges, but if you told them this and didn't tell them it was a healing surge, they'd be like, yeah, this is actually way more realistic, you know, like.
Yeah, I have mixed opinions on like the immersion thing, because this game is very clearly like gamist.
Yeah, sure.
But I do go out of my way to keep most things like diegetic if I can find a way to. Because that's something I do care about. You know, something doesn't break my immersion if it's like abstracting a part of the fiction. But it does break my immersion if it's like conflicting with the fiction. And that's the reason, like Beowulf complaining earlier about like the restock mechanic. Beowulf's right. They're right. And I'll replace it with something if I can think of a better mechanic that feels more diegetic.
Just make town obscenely expensive. So then we pick skills for our class, which are the talents we can specialize in. We can also take them twice, as we mentioned before, if we want to get those extra sparks benefit, basically, from Trespasser. Note your speed, which is in squares. Your hurry distance is half your speed, and it determines how much you can move with a small action, which is kind of like a minor action or a swift action.
Basically, yeah. There's a big emphasis on like managing those in this game.
Note your number of equipment slots, then obtain starting gear. Weapons and armor must be placed in your equip slots. Gain stamina equal to the number of empty equip slots. You can carry 10 items by default. Equipped items still count against the number of items you can carry 10 items by default. Equipped items still count against the number of items carried. So basically, if you have more gear, which you can carry, then you're going to have less stamina.
Yeah. So equipped slots are this game's thing that they use instead of like weapon and armor proficiencies, where, a sword might be 2 equip slots and a shield might be 1 equip slot, and if etc. And if you're like a fighter, you get like 6, and if you're a wizard, you get like 3. So then, you still have like, if you're a wizard and you really want to, use a great sword, you can. You're just gonna have a harder time of it than a martial. And if you're a fighter and you're just like, I just want a sword, no armor, I want to be, very lightly armored, then you get rewarded for that more than a wizard would.
There you go. Okay. Right. Because you have more slots, empty slots, even though you're not. Then we pick name, background, personality, and all of the good stuff that makes a role-playing game a role-playing game. Yeah. And then the party sheet, the supply stat, which is spent to take travel rests, is tracked party-wide rather than on individual character sheets. Your party starts with 3 out of 6 supply, plus any bonuses to max supply from classes like Merchant and Ranger. This starts to sound a little Fabula Ultima-ish in its own way. But
this is your like attrition resource thing.
Right.
You spend it to take rests. If you run out, you can't rest anymore until you go back to town.
Right. It's funny you say supply. In the Dragonbane hack that we're trying to make for our mega game, Dragon Tide, we are just sort of defaulting to like calling all like the miscellaneous gear that you get from like killing NPCs, like armor, 12 arrows, their knife.
Oh yeah.
And we just call it supply. And then and then when you get back to town, it's just, you can just track supply, and then you can just sell supply because it's easier than having to track all those different little, seven suits of leather armor, 7 small wooden shields, 7 rusty scimitars, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't like quantum inventory. Supply is just for resting. If you pick up like a crowbar, that's not, abstracted into supply. That's a crowbar, and you can't exchange it for a pickaxe, etc.
Sean with a $20 super chat says Dragonbane mentioned. I mean, look, Dragonbane's a great game. In my opinion, it's probably one of the best OSR games out there, just because it's literally, quite frankly, the simplest and most intuitive RPG game that I've ever seen played.
I have to go use the bathroom. You can talk about Dragonbane for like 5 minutes. I'll be right back.
Dragonbane is very cool. You should play it. I mean, the main advantage of Dragonbane is like players literally don't have to know the rules. They just every skill starts with a number, and they all have to do is roll a d20 and roll equal or under that number, and that's like the only rule that they need to know, and it's really great for that. It's interesting though because it depends on the game. Janitor was talking about quantum inventory, right? I'm playing Torchbearer campaigns, 2 Torchbearer campaigns with patrons. And there's no quantum inventory there, right? You either have it. In fact, the whole system is based around managing slots and do I bring this crowbar or don't I? Should we bring an extra pair of rope? We don't have the slots for it. So I certainly appreciate that if a game really wants to focus on do you have the right gear or not, that you should avoid quantum inventory. That being said, if you don't want to track all the stuff needed for taking rests, I suppose that's fine. Sean says, I wanted to play Karn, but my players like 13th Age. Dragonbane to me is just a bit crunchier than Karn. It's crunchier than Karn. Karn is very not crunchy at all. Very lightweight. All right. Jake says, I don't care for inventory tracking in my TTRPGs, but I love playing Tetris with an inventory grid in video games. Fair enough. Torchbearer is not necessarily a Tetris-like grid. I mean, it's just slots, so it's not like you have some weird L-shaped piece or anything like that, but it is definitely, it's definitely a thing that you have to manage, and especially for like purposes of like, do you have enough slots to carry, carry what you're trying to to take out the treasure. So like a great example of this is, I'm going to bring up my. So this is our Torchbearer game that is ongoing, and you can see here, like they found this this jade statue, which is like probably the size of like a toaster oven or like a microwave, but it takes up 4 slots in the backpack. The backpack only has 6 slots. So they had to like move stuff around and all this other stuff. And the alchemist in the party had made an elixir of courage. And so this character poured out their water skin, poured out the water that was in their water skin so that they could put the potion in the water skin so that they could keep carrying it. Whereas this character, you can see this character's wearing leather armor and a cloak. So they don't have enough torso slots to, they only get 3 torso slots. They're using 1 torso slot for a cloak, 1 torso slot for a leather armor. So they only have slots for a satchel, and a satchel only gives you 3 slots. These slots here at the bottom are their belt pouches. And belt pouches are great, but yeah. Tundalus says my back still hurts from that jade statues. Yeah, so Tundalus is in this party as well.
Okay.
And, but anyways, and you can see here, this is actually their mage, and because the mage is actually wearing basically 2 backpacks. They're wearing a backpack and they're also wearing a shoulder pack. So their mage is just loaded down with tons of stuff. And instead of wielding a weapon, their mage is walking around with a jug in his hand, which contains 3 draughts of liquid. So it's actually pretty funny. Welcome back.
Okay, Beowulf, I actually kind of like that system. I'm normally a person who hates quantum inventory, but the bit about like, if you have your pack horse and squire with you, then you can just like have any tools you need. But if you're like without your horse, now you have to manage your gear. That makes sense. I like that. That's kind of neat. I was wondering how to do like pack animals in this game, and now I'm like,
yeah. So
that's pretty good.
Yeah. So Torchbearer does something similar. And again, I was showing people the Torchbearer system. The thing about the Torchbearer system is that I closed it. Is that the game assumes that the reason why you only have like 6 slots for stuff is because the game assumes that you have everything in your backpack that you need to like do your skills. So like if you're an armorer and maybe you don't have like a forge and a bellows, but like if you're at camp and you want to like work out, fix some broken links in someone's chainmail, we assume that you have some pliers and little hammers to make the changes. If you're a cook, we assume that you've got the Samwise Gamgee frying pan and, maybe some like a little.
That's a good rule. I should steal that.
Yeah.
Actually.
And then as long as you have your backpack, you have access to all those tools. But if you lose your backpack, then you don't. But so the inventory slots are only for things like loot and weapons and like the important stuff, right? Not like the fiddly bits. Okay. And then we have some random character classes and random race generators if you want to use that.
I like the idea of rolling of a campaign where everyone rolls a random class. Also the random like creature type there. This is my way of saying that like most people are humans.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
so in our Dragonbane game, if we our Dragontide game, some people were very much against this. We want to give people a choice, which is this. The way it works is you roll your race randomly, okay? Which is there's a table in the book, and human is the default, and elves are very rare and stuff like that. But you roll your race randomly, and if you don't like the race that you rolled, you can choose to be human instead. So
I like that. I like that. That's a good mechanic. Because I know why people hate it. I like it.
Right. People hate it because they're like, no, I want to be an elf, and that's how you end up with 75% of your people being elves. But no, like our idea is like, nope, you roll randomly, and then if you don't like it, you can just be a human. All right, advancement. So here we go. This is what happens when we level up. As we adventure, we get XP from overcoming dangers, and this is. I don't know if you talk about it here, but maybe that's later in the book. But you basically specifically say in this game, you get XP from fights.
Yeah,
So it's
I get why I wouldn't do this for any other game.
Okay,
but Tactiquest is It's a fighting. It's for fighting.
I mean,
you do fights.
Tactiquest is to, OSR D&D 4th edition, right? That as Final Fantasy Tactics was to Final Fantasy, right? I mean, it's a game about the battles in a sense.
Pretty much. It's it's about doing fights. And it's also this way because you might run into a lot of, situations where you're like, man, this would be so much more convenient if we finagled our way around to this combat instead of fighting it. Because that is kind of optimal. It just naturally ends up being optimal in a lot of situations because combat, drains your resources and talking your way past combat doesn't.
Right.
And I wanted to add this little kind of counter incentive where it's like, oh, well, we'd have to expend a lot of resources to fight this dangerous monster, but that's probably a lot of experience we'd get that we wouldn't get if we stealthed around it.
So you can see here you gain a level by spending 20 times your level plus 40 at a space safe rest. So you can figure that out yourself.
Yeah, it's a little bit of that formula is a little fiddly, but it's probably worth it.
In case not, you can just look at the table. But you can see you get a perk at most levels, and then every so often, every 4th and 8th, you get either more items that you can carry, which also would increase your stamina if you didn't carry them. Is that right? Or is that equip slots? No, that's equip slots.
Equip slots and carried items are totally separate.
Got it. Okay.
Which I probably should clarify in that character creation section.
Okay, that was because that was a little unclear to me. Or you get more class skills. By the way, for longer campaigns, just double the XP required to level up. And then you can see how many hit points you get for the level. Gaining XP from combat. Each enemy is worth as much XP when defeated as its danger rating at the end of the battle. Add up the XP for each enemy and split it between the PCs, rounding up. They also gain extra XP equal to how many battles they've done since their last rest. So you have an escalation mechanic here, right? If you fight more... If you fight more monsters in a single rest period, you will get more XP for those later encounters. And
it's not a ton of experience, but
I love it.
It's a little bit of a.
All players listen. Yeah. Players don't want to be cowards, and they don't want to run back to their camp every 5 minutes. But damn it, if it's not the optimal decision, if you can make it even a little beneficial for them.
There's actually another very good reason to not do that in this game. And it's that you have a limited, that supply mechanic from earlier. That's how many times you can rest before you got to go back to town.
Right.
But this is to make that, I guess, go down a little easier. It's like, oh, well, it sucks that we only have one supply left, so we don't want to rest. But hey, extra little bonus experience.
And here is a sidebar you will never see in another RPG ever again. Non-combat XP, ? As Tactiquest is explicitly a combat-focused game, XP is generally not handed out for other accomplishments. This is to nudge the players towards getting into fights because fights are the game.
Yeah.
So you can retrain whenever you level up. We talked about multi-classing. We'll kind of skip that a little bit, and then we have the different creature types.
I actually do want to talk about multi-classing.
All right, it's your stream. We can go into it.
So. I didn't want to do the level by level multi-classing because I think I don't want the formula for multi-classing to be that you to be something that isn't bespoke. Every class has here's what you get if you're single class, here's what you get if you multi-class into this class. And those are separate and they don't and nothing I change about the base class has to change something about the multi-class because I want these two things to be balanced separately because sometimes you get a feature that's sometimes, if you're playing 3rd or 5th edition and you get an ability that's, sometimes you'd be like, oh, okay, on its base class, this, is pretty mediocre. But if you multi-class into it with this other class, then now it creates something wildly overpowered. And it's just that's so much harder to balance, which is why multi-classing here is just
so it's a lot more like Pathfinder 2, right? Where
as far as I'm aware, yes. I don't know much about Pathfinder 2.
Yeah, but basically you don't just take a level in that class. They have a very specific. They basically have a very specific feat perk, if you will, that you take and then there's you don't get everything that the class gets. You get select things that let you feel like that class and let you gain some of that class's power without being the whole thing.
I don't know a ton about Pathfinder 2, but that sounds like something it does right.
Yes. Most people, including me, really praise how well, especially if a game cares about some sort of internalized balance. Yeah.
I also think the art for like the multi-classing guy is like some of my favorite art I made for this book.
I did like it. In fact, I was
whatever his deal is.
I was originally zoomed in on the multi-classing, and then I actually zoomed out just so I could show the art because I love this character who's just like literally wielding like one of everything. It's like I can't pick up my mind. I want to be it all. So you have your different types of ancestries here. They get different abilities. A human is, as has been the case since 2000. They get an extra perk, aka they get an extra feat.
I know a lot of people complain that like, oh, humans are boring. Why would I ever want to play a human? But I like boring humans. I like them because I think they kind of like add texture. Where it's like, if I'm playing an elf, but the human is also like as weird as an elf, that bugs me.
Yeah.
If I'm playing a human and humans are as weird as elves, that bugs me. I like humans to be very basic, but also like, convenient enough that you'd really want to pick them. Like you're like, well, I really want these, these 3 perks, but I can only afford 2 unless I play a human.
Right.
I like that.
And then we have some human-specific perks, basically human-specific feats. Ancestry feats is what they're called in Pathfinder 2. Yep. And these are tied to the human traits, this tenacity, this defiance. And then we see this again with dwarves. Heavyweight, they have displacement 1 and can't be knocked prone by attacks. And if you play 4th edition D&D, you know exactly what this is.
Yes, that is exactly the same fucking thing in 4th edition, where if you get pushed, you're pushed 1 square less. I like that for dwarves.
Oh, I do too. In fact, as I've said this before, it led to one of my favorite 4th edition moments of all time. Have you ever heard of this?
I think I've heard it before, but tell the story again.
So the story is the group was Paragon tier, so that's mid to low teens for other people, and they were fighting the king of the trolls, and they're in this final fight, and the wizard casts a wall of fire spell on the troll king, damages him, and the way regeneration works is if you took any fire damage in the previous round, you don't regenerate. So the fire king or the troll king, and they're also vulnerable to fire. So the Troll King takes a bunch of fire damage because he starts his turn in the wall, and then he leaves the wall, obviously. And
you want to push him back in.
Then the rogue, maybe, I think, comes in, does a rogue attack, hits him, pushes him back into the wall. So now he's in the wall, takes the fire damage again. And then the dwarf fighter comes over, and he has a daily power called like Burying Axe or something, and he hits with it. And the way Burying Axe works is basically as long as you are adjacent to that model, it is immobilized. It can't move. And so now the Troll King is stuck in the wall of fire. And the Troll King doesn't have any push powers, but every creature in the game had access to the Bull Rush action, which lets you make a strength check versus their fortitude defense. And if you succeed, it pushes them 1. But as a dwarf, they are immune to push 1. Right? They're pushed 1 less square, which meant that this troll could not physically push the dwarf, which meant he could not, short of knocking the dwarf unconscious, he could not end this effect. And so the Troll King was just like forced to stay in the wall of fire for the rest of the fight. And it was like this awesome, like you talk about teamwork, positioning, and tactics. It was like all 3 of those things in a nutshell.
I love that shit.
And it was so cool,
That's exactly the sort of thing I want, the sort of moments I want this game to create.
So very cool stuff. And then, obviously then the warlord was just healing, but everybody has a role to play. Okay. So anyways, so every race, every type here has different passive abilities that you just get, but you also could pick, if you want to invest some of your limited perks in in some of your ancestry abilities, you can get those. So we've got elves, we've got goblins, we've got dwarves, we've got humans. Goblins have become a little bit more mainstream these days. Orcs also a little bit more mainstream.
I like having them as core races.
Okay.
I don't quite like having them as like, oh yeah, there's just, every town has just as many orcs and goblins as humans, and they're not considered different at all. But I like having them be playable and not like, oh, well, you have to be evil or you have to be the super special Drizzt exception. Well, when every other orc is evil, etc. I don't like those.
But the one that really stands out here is the Naga. Serpent folk with scales, tails, forked tongues, slit-shaped pupils, born of snake-worshipping acolytes, blessed with a serpentine form. Where did this come from?
This is probably going to end up in the Bestiary, where because the Bestiary also has like a lot of other playable, creature types that are, a little rarer. Like you can play kobolds or frog people or undead or someone who got taken over by like parasitic mushrooms or whatever. But I didn't have a section for Nagas in the Bestiary when I made this, so I was like, oh, I'll just put it in the core book.
All right, fair enough.
But people seem to like it. So that's why they're here. I like them. I'll probably put them in the Bestiary, but I do like Nagas a lot. They're I'm a hypocrite for doing this because I hate when
you hate duck people, yes.
Yeah, where it's like, oh well, you've got all these fairly standard like fantasy races, and then you got the fucking like creator's pet race. And it's like, oh, ducks, these don't fit into my fantasy world. And people probably have that reaction to Nagas here, and I don't blame them.
You know what? And I respect that you understand that, and that is totally acceptable.
It's so we'll see if they stay in the core book.
So we're not going to have the ability to go through all of these classes, but you do have a lot of classes here. You have warrior, bruiser, vanguard, strategist, ranger, scoundrel, swashbuckler, wayfarer, bard, merchant, alchemist, coming soon tinkerer, arcanist, war mage, runeblade, abjurer, valkyrie, sun priest, earth priest, coming soon witch, necromancer, coming soon starcaller, beguiler, and coming soon oracle. That's a pretty long list of classes.
Yeah, This is like me being extremely self-indulgent and wanting like 30 classes.
Okay.
I love this shit. This is the individual classes are mostly pretty simple. Most of them fit on like a few pages, and this game has a pretty small page size and big font, which allows me to make lots of them.
Right.
So I did. One of the this doesn't really go anywhere, but one of the things I wanted to do with this system was I wanted to have more martial classes than casters. I didn't quite make it, but I think there's exactly as many non-magic classes.
At least that's something. I mean, that's saying something these days.
Because I hate when a game is like, oh, here's all your like fantasy characters. You have fighter and thief, and then 10 million spellcasters, and your fighter and thief have like most of their subclasses give them some kind of magic. Like, oh, I'm a psionic knight, or I'm a knight that splits into two people, which is kick-ass, but I don't want that to be like most of
the way that, for better or for worse, unless you're playing a game like Lord of the Rings, for me, magic is equivalent to technology. And, you may not be a elite hacker engineer in a sci-fi game, but you still probably might use like a hover belt, and you might use a laser pistol, right? You're using technology. You may not create it, you may not craft it, but you use it. And to me, that's the role magic usually ends up playing in most trad TTRPG.
White whale goals at some point is like, I want to make a game where magic like actually feels rare, and not in a way where it's like, oh, magic is rare, but you can still play a wizard who gets like 5 spells.
I was gonna say, I mean, you can go play the One Ring RPG. I mean, there's not a wizard class. There isn't.
I like that. That's
because
that feels good to me. I hate when magic feels completely unspecial because it's everywhere and everyone can do it.
Right. Because like you're like, oh, okay, you're looking through the classes. You're like, okay, oh, the scholar. This must be the spellcaster. No, it's the scholar.
Yeah, I was going to include a scholar class in this game, but everything I was gonna give it, I felt like, this should just be standard. Like I was like, it'll let you see enemy hit points. But then I decided everyone can see enemy hit points because I think that makes for better strategy.
I do too. I'm well known for when I like play on Bob, one of Bob's favorite things about when he started playing games with me and then started playing with other people is he was like, yeah, it's so weird. He's like, why? I was like, because whenever we're fighting monsters, you make me track their hit points. And I was like, yeah, I was like, because I'll be like, hey, Bob, that ogre has 90 hit points. Track it. I don't have time for this. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And that's why it becomes really cool when I go, all right, Bob, 150. He's like, oh my God, how are we ever going to be able to beat this? So then you talk about the roles. You don't explicitly define them, but the classes kind of have a fourth edition, defender.
I didn't want to like restrict myself to like, oh, these are the categories and everyone fits into exactly one category.
Right.
But everything leans into a particular role. And
so
there's the party composition blurb where
make sure somebody can do damage. That's basically what you say here.
There are a lot of classes here that are like, oh, I'm like the Abjurer, which is the defense mage that makes barriers and gives everyone temporary hit points, and I can't do damage for shit. And if everyone plays a class like that,
right? Yes,
the game's not fun.
Exactly. I will say this. I've said this before. 4th edition was designed around 5 PCs. If you have a defender, a leader, a controller, and 2 strikers, you are just going to do it at the best that you can. So you talk about the different things, but you also talk about if some of the classes do have extra utility outside of combat. Some of the classes have a little bit of everything. Some classes not necessarily about how much damage they do, but are they really tough, and do they have a lot of hit points and all this other stuff. So I think that's really cool, and you're discussing that. So is there a class that chat wants to see? We've got warrior. Is there a class you really want to highlight? Because we could do like 2.
Let me look through them.
Jake is saying Abjurer is a great class, whereas Jake is saying that Runeblade is exactly the kind of character I want to play. Sam's saying Runeblade. It's D says my favorite class is the warrior for reasons Jan knows. So we're seeing a lot of Runeblade. So how about we start off with the Runeblade?
All right, yeah, Runeblade. It's actually like one of the more basic classes because it's like, okay, you're good at hitting things with swords and you're good at spells and you can teleport. And that doesn't leave any room in your power budget for anything else interesting.
All right. So channeling spells through rune carved web. Okay, let's start off here. For starters, 10 out of 10. No notes. I love the art. I love the rune blade. I love the runic etching on the hem of the cloak, on the shoulder and the cloak. It's awesome. Very sweet. Channeling spells through rune-carved weapons, rune blades blend magic with martial combat to create a uniquely potent fighting style, the center of storm of spells on the battlefield. Playstyle, weave magic into melee attacks, lots of teleporting, and mid-range attack spells. They have
the mid-range attack thing. I basically wanted every like rune blade spell to either like emanate from you or like be melee in some way, or
That's
like
great.
Be a line out. Because I don't want us to be like a magic artillery class like a war mage where you're like shooting fireballs from half the battlefield away.
Correct.
You should be like,
you're the fireball.
Melee-ish.
Right,
melee fireball.
Right, you're the fireball.
Yeah, you're the fireball. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the sword mage is a much beloved. Obviously, that was more of a defender class from 4th edition. But for me, the cool thing about a rune blade is instead of a fireball, right? Like you teleport into the midst of an enemy, you explode in fire, right? Like
I love that. That's what I was going for.
That's much cooler, right? So I'm right there with you. Lines or like emanations, cones that emanate from me, rather than lobbing a fireball from a safe distance. Yeah, I'm right there with you. So they have got they could take up to 4 strain, which again is basically healing surges. They have mid-range hit points. They have 5 equipped slots. They have a 5 square speed. They've got starting gear of, some spells and some scrolls. They got some skills. Here are their abilities. Blade magic. Whenever you make a melee strike, any spell that you cast for the rest of the turn has -1 cast time. You can still only cast 1 spell per turn. And I'm assuming this means that you can turn a spell, which is probably usually a big action, into a small action. Which means,
exactly.
Which means that you can basically strike and cast a spell in the same turn.
Yeah, there are some. The way cast time works is it'll say a number, and then you have to do that many actions, which are small or move or big actions, and a big action counts for 2. So, yeah, exactly how you said it.
But you can't. But as like a hard limit, you can only cast 1 spell per turn, so you can never double spell, which is. Awesome. And I think most people who play a class like this, they're like, look, I want to swing my sword. I want to cast spells.
And this encourages you to do both.
They also gain basically once per battle or once per scene. They kind of gain the Eladrin teleportation ability of teleporting 5 squares as a small action. Interestingly, not a move action. So you can
it's
so you can teleport,
maybe it
then
should
move.
be a move action. It's been pretty potent in playtesting, so
right?
We'll see.
Yes, just because now that means you can move and then teleport, so it's a lot of movement. And then you start with 3 spells known. You gain an additional spell every other level. Your mana limit is 2, and your mana points are up to 10. Now, you want to very quickly kind of cover what mana limit and mana points means.
All right, yeah. So mana points, it's just every spell costs X amount of magic. You spend it to cast the spell. Mana limit it's kind of a soft cap on like how high level of a spell you can cast. Where like, so you can cast spells that cost more mana than your mana limit, but then you take 1 strain for each point that it goes over your limit. So if you have your mana limit is 2 and you cast a 4 mana spell, now you're taking 2 strain. Which the reason it works like that is I want low level characters to be able to take like powerful high level magic and get a taste of that early on, but it's not something you can spam every fight. It's something that you like pull out when you're desperate and you're like, okay, I have to pull out the big guns or we're going to lose this fight.
Absolutely. We last year we played Forbidden Lands campaign, and in Forbidden Lands, you always know your level of spells lower, but you also know the next level of spells. But when you cast a spell from the next level of spells, it automatically triggers a roll on the miscast table.
That's really cool.
And so, which can, obviously could work out badly for you. But I love giving players a break glass in case of emergency type abilities.
Yes, I love that. And I like that casters get access to that by default in this system. That was the goal.
Yes. So I'm a big fan of that. And again, the numbers here, I'm going to agree with Tundalus. I mean, this is right in my range. I
was about to comment on that. He says, I love how small these numbers stay. I love the small numbers. Damage numbers are pretty small as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for this because I mean, if mana went up to 15 or whatever, I mean, this is obviously the Rune Blade, so I'm sure there's other classes that go higher. But like, I'm just saying, like, to me, this is enough where 1 point or 2 points feels impactful. But not so much that it's like, oh, I just get to do this once and then I'm over for the day.
I don't like ballooning like numbers. I enjoy when they stay small enough that every +1 feels impactful.
Right.
That's something that goes for like that's how damage works in this system. That's how like money works. Every like you'll like a super powerful like spell scroll that of a high level spell is like 100 silver. And that's about as high as the like money costs get.
And we gain the spellcasting. And then we get some bonus up levels. We get an additional equipment slot at 4. We get additional damage on strikes. And at level 10, we become a Rune Lord. And once per safe rest. That basically means once per between visits to town. And when we played, I played a really heavily, we jokingly called it Dungeon Time Extreme, but it's DTX is what we call it. And it was my really, really heavily house ruled. It was like D&D 5e plus 5 torches deep plus PBTA plus Torchbearer campaign that I ran. And basically in that game, we used the rule that a short rest was like a night at a camp, and a long rest was like a week in town.
This game does.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? That's another thing I want to give to 5e. It has an optional rule for something similar. And that's where this.
I didn't make that up, right? That was from the DMG as an optional rule. But you can cast any 4-mana Rune Blade spell without costing any of your mana. And you can only do that once per, whatever. But basically, you can cast one big spell for free, as long as it's a Rune Blade specific spell.
Mm-hmm. Spell lists in this game are very. They don't have a lot of overlap. Most classes are like a lot of exclusive spells.
So here is the list of Rune Blade spells. Now, there doesn't seem to be a level requirement for this. So
that's what the mana limit is for.
Right, I got it. So I could take Overvolt at level 1, but that would be
2.
I'm sorry, level 2. But that would be pretty.
Yeah, you can't take it at level 1.
Right.
But you can take it at level 2, and then you can just do that. It's just gonna burn through your strain, and you're gonna regret it. Next battle when you're like, oh, I need healing, but I can't get any healing because I cast a crazy strong spell last fight.
So Jake, do you learn a new spell every level? For the Rune Blade, no. You start with 3, you gain 1 at 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th.
That might change. I think it feels kind of lame to like have levels where you don't learn spells.
Yeah, I agree. I do kind of agree. I understand why not, but I also kind of agree.
Yeah, we'll see. Depends what I do with like the scaling for the system in general.
So we're not going to go through all of these, but you can see here, you can arcane step and teleport up to 5 squares. You can create a protective bubble that moves with somebody. Gravitic body lets you resist falling damage and forced movement. Flicker step, you teleport and then teleport again for free every turn following after that. Fire breath does a bunch of fire damage in an area next to you. So you got to get a sense and a feel for these specific Rune Blade spells.
Yeah, and all of them, if you click the spell name, it takes you to the actual full spell description. But I wanted to include this little table of like summarizing each spell so that you didn't have to. You used to have to like rifle through the entire list of spells, and I was glad that I finished like making it so you don't have to do that before this stream happened. I'm
curious, and I'm actually going to put this in. Yeah, Tundla says this must have taken a while. Yeah, says the guy who.
Oh God, I have to reformat the whole document, and like LibreOffice started lagging like crazy.
It says to say. By the way, do you know how Tundla designed his game in Word? In Word.
That sounds. I actually don't know much about Word. I use LibreOffice because it's free, and I don't want to pay for Word.
I've tried to learn InDesign like eight or 9 times. This is going to be a really odd question, and it's more of a design question.
Oh, yeah?
Okay. This list, would you rather it be, and I'm going to say alphabetical, which is what it is.
Or ordered by mana?
Or ordered by mana.
That's a good question.
Yeah, because I'm just curious, because my initial thing when I looked at this is, yeah, I think I'd like want to know what all my 1s are and what all my 2s are and what all my 3s are.
I'm voting for mana, which is the opposite of how I did that. But it was easier for me to like format it this way.
Yes.
Because I have to.
Well, especially because there's no levels, right? In that respect. I mean, obviously you would do it alphabetical by mana, or you do mana by alphabetical. Whatever, you wouldn't just randomly throw them in, but like I would want to see arcane armament, arcane step, detect magic, swirling swirl, and snowdrift kind of all at the top. Beowulf says, I don't know, I'm triggered either way. How could you be triggered by this? Hey, what's up, 8 Genzo? We are going through level 2 janitors, not
Hello.
fantasy heartbreaker. It's a
fantasy heartbreaker.
Tactiquest. All right. So while that finishes up, let's take a look at the Rune Blade perks. So you could take, if you want to invest in magic, you can get yourself more mana.
Yeah. All the very basic ones are at the start.
You can learn two Rune Blade spells. You can take this up to 2 times if you want more spells than the table gives you. You can also get more equipment slots, which is like weapon proficiencies, is the way you've described that, right? But it also would give you stamina. Sharp Mind. No instance of damage that doesn't deal at least 3 damage can disrupt your concentration. So
I think that's available to every caster. I might get rid of it because I'm not sure how many spells actually ended up having concentration.
Got it.
Not a lot.
Teleport Specialist. Anytime you teleport another creature, or teleported by something, you can increase the max distance by 1 square. That feels a little underwhelming. I feel like it should be 2, but
it comes up. It comes up.
Then we have
you get a lot of teleports as a Rune Blade.
Spell Strike Technique. The cast time reduction from blade magic applies to all spells, regardless of when you cast them, effectively reducing the cast time of all the spells you cast by 1. Though that's huge. Isn't that just like a must-take perk?
Well, kind of. I think the first one is like you have to attack and then you cast the spell, and this lets you like teleport for free if you're or teleport with reduced cast time and then stab. So it's definitely like strong enough to take. I don't think it's must take.
Gravitic Anchor gives us an additional square of resistance to being pushed away or moved around for force movement. Dwarf Rune in before Dwarf Rune Blade. And whenever you cast a spell with an area, you can pull a creature next to the area 1 square, so you can suck people into the area. Very cool.
Yeah.
By the way, 70% of people said order it by mana.
I might change it if it's not too much hassle. It might be too much hassle.
It might be hassle. Spatial blinds. Any damage you deal immediately after teleporting is increased by 1. Very cool. Arcane conversion. You can give up your use of arcane shift to recover 2 mana points. That's the teleport ability that you have.
Yeah.
This prevents you from using arcane shift until you take a travel rest. So basically, you can't just use it literally every fight or every scene, right? You can just do it once. There's more perks. Wow. Okay. Arcane enhancement. You gain extra use of your arcane shift power once per travel rest, which is again mutually exclusive with the arcane conversion, so you can't like cheese your way into this.
Yeah.
Elemental heart. You choose one of the element types: fire, cold, lightning, or magic. You get a resistance to that, and you can change any damage you deal to do that type of damage as well.
The thing where you can give up your arcane shift to like for more mana, that's there because it's part of like a category of perk that a lot of classes get where it's like, oh, does this like part of the class not match your like the fantasy you have for this class? Do you not want to be teleporting? Do you just want to be a guy who's like, I use a sword and I use fire magic? Well, now you can convert that into more fire magic.
Got it. Pyromancer. You do more damage with fire.
It's ongoing fire.
You light them on fire. Cryomancer slows the target by 3 squares. Awesome. So they move slower. Electromancer, you deal 4 damage, and then you also deal extra lightning damage to a target within 3 squares, so you get to bounce it, crack it. Anti-magic thorns resist magic damage, and enemies that target you with a spell immediately take 2 damage. Cool. Spatial snap. When you use arcane shift, that's the teleport that you get. You could deal 1 magic damage to every creature within 1 square of the space that you left. Cool. So you AoE on the way out.
Yeah.
Rune synthesis. Your weapon counts as a spellcasting focus, and you learn 1 arcanist focus spell. I don't quite know what that is.
It's a cantrip.
All right, fair enough. Spell bulwark. Once per safe rest. When a single target spell is cast within 6 squares or cast on a target within 6 squares, you make yourself the target and are hit even if you're outside of the range normally, and you reduce any damage you take by 2. You may use this feature on a spell with multiple targets or an area of effect, but then increase any damage taken from the spell by 1 instead of reducing. So basically, you can redirect a fireball onto yourself.
Yeah.
Cool. Phase Blade, no limit. Whenever an engaged enemy hits you, you may immediately teleport to any other space next to them. So they hit you, you teleport to the other side of them.
Yeah.
Whatever, what have you. And lastly, reflect. Once per safe rest. If you're targeted by a harmful spell, you take no damage from the spell. And if you were the only target, you reflect it back against the person who cast it. And then here are those specific perks that you get if you go into a Runeblade multiclass, which we will not go to, but you can see there is some limits to what perks you can take. And you also...
Multiclassing is pretty limited, but like it's enough that hopefully it'll like... One of my goals with the multi-classing system was I wanted it to, so you could just like dip into any other class and just have it like work without having to be like, oh, well, these 2 classes don't, they don't synergize for whatever reason. Obviously you're going to have some of that anyway, but like.
Yeah. So, there's so many classes and there are only 10 levels. I don't know. I feel like there's a good amount of options and choice here. I feel like you could definitely build a very interesting little component. And remember too, you can also take perks from your class. You can take them from your ancestry, and then also, right, don't your weapons give you special abilities as well?
Yeah. They do. Not perks. If you want to,
not perks, but
yeah.
Well, we're going to move on to equipment and gear next. So,
okay. Could I ask?
Yeah.
Could we check out the warrior class real quick?
Yeah. Warrior. So here we have the warrior. They're all round combatant, good offense, good defense, good mobility, best armor, best weapons. They get B grade, almost max grade hit points. They have 6 equip slots. And they have combat opportunist benefit, a fighting style, imposing, and martial eye. Is there anything you want to specifically cover, or do you want me to talk about everything?
The reason I wanted to talk about warrior was specifically fighting style.
Okay.
Before we get into equipment, because so one thing that I absolutely hate is when you find a magic item and you're like, oh, here's this cool morning star that has some cool magic power, but the player's like, oh, well, I can't use a morning star because my build is all about polearms, and I have like 3 feats and 5 class abilities that only work with pole arms, so I can't use it. So this game doesn't have anything like that. Instead, all of the like cool stuff that's like weapon specific just comes from your weapon.
I love that because I've lamented about this a million times, and every time we've played OSR games, I almost make it. I almost go out of my way, like you know, by like the 5th or 6th session, you know, the fighter's wielding a +2 trident, you know, because like they found a trident, you know, and it's just like I love that, and I hate the idea of like, oh my god, it's Thor's hammer. It's Mjolnir. I can't believe it. We're 5th level and we just found the artifact of the god of hammer. Like, oh my god. All right, what are we doing with that? Well, I've put 2 feats into it, so I guess we're just gonna sell it in town. You know, like it's just like the most. It's the most unbelievable.
I hate weapon specialization so much.
Me too.
Because I think like it. I've heard people say like, oh well, you know, if a player picks a longsword, then they want to be using longswords the whole campaign because that's what they think is cool. And I kind of agree, but I also think like, I think it's a cool moment to like swap weapons and have a totally different like play style, based on something you found that you didn't pick. I think that's a fun, like, yeah, it's a cool moment.
Yeah, I'm a huge believer, and also too, I think back to our 3rd edition, and when we were playing 3rd edition D&D for the first time, obviously it had like weapon focus and eventually weapon specialization, more and more feats. But I remember like early on, like when people started playing, like you'd be a fighter and you'd have a longsword because you wanted it for the crit, but you'd have like a mace on your bout because what if you fought a skeleton and you know and you needed the bludgeoning weapon? And I love that characters had, you know, and you were also pretty handy with a bow. And I just love that was legitimately, you know, you were this well-rounded warrior and weren't just this like one-trick super pony, which I just like. So yeah, so the way this works is one of the options that you can choose is weapon swap. All weapons in your inventory that aren't heavier or require more hands than your currently equipped weapon can be used as if they were equipped. So basically you have access to everything in your backpack.
Yeah, you know, which I like the idea of like a max level fighter with this, that like every time the party finds a magic weapon, they're like, oh, we're all casters, we'll give this to the fighter. And you've got like 5 magic weapons in your backpack that you can just swap between whenever.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I mean, again, I played a lot of Final Fantasy 1 growing up, and you know, that's probably the first game I'll ever play on stream is Final Fantasy 1, you know, the game from 1984.
I can't wait for that. I will watch the whole thing.
And Final Fantasy 1 is probably my top 5 favorite games of all time. But one of the reasons I love it is because when you're playing that game and you play anything, if you don't have a fighter or a knight, you're like, you find these cool weapons and you're like, oh, no one could use it. Oh, but the fighter always can. And like, that's like,
the fighter can use everything.
The fighter can use everything. And I'm like, I love that. You know? And like, I remember the first time I played through the game and I remember being like, oh, and then you get to the end and you find at the very, very end, you find a Masamune and you're like, oh, anybody can wield it, even your white mage. And I was like, screw that. I'm giving it to my second fighter. You know, like, because why would I give it to my white mage? My white mage is casting cure, you know?
Also, I want to respond to Thunderless, who says, I think weapon swap is such a sweet way to handle the collector thing. It's so simple and straightforward. Weapon swapping is such a simulationist chore that I've never been able to resolve. Thank you. For everyone else, it's a simulationist chore, but if you're a fighter, you don't have to deal with any of that. You can just be like, I use it.
Yeah.
It's in my backpack.
I love it. So yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, incredible. And also too, I'm going to scroll through these really quick because I just think the art for all the different classes is so cool.
Thank you so much.
The character illustrations here are so cool. I love your use of motion, using the line art to kind of really it makes the pieces feel really alive in a way that a lot of art just doesn't these days. It feels very staticky. And I just think it's really fun. So very cool stuff. Ranger, Scoundrel. We got the Swashbuckler, who I used in the thumbnail because I thought that was a great piece. So I love that one.
Thank you.
The Wayfarer, straight out of a Fabula Ultima game. I mean, all this art would look so good in Fabula Ultima too.
I think Wayfarer is actually not the Fabula Ultima Wayfarer where it's like a utility class. This Wayfarer is just like, if you want to be every adventurer, you get a little bit of spells and a little bit of weapons and a little bit of skills.
I love it. It's like
it's the everything class.
There was a 3rd edition class called the Factotum that did that. Tundalus will probably go till 10, so we'll probably go for another 45 minutes. I do
give me your big gripe, Thunderless.
Because I do want to cover.
I want to hear you complain.
I do want to cover equipment and gear. I'm not going to cover spellcasting too much because we kind of covered that when we talked about that. But I do want to talk about equipment and gear a little bit. I want to talk about resting and healing, and then I do want to be able to spend some time talking about the monsters because I know that you said that you really like the monsters.
All right, yeah, I'll stop holding you up.
All right. So real quick with equipment and gear, the idea here is that, your character starts with stuff. Depending on your class, you start with some kits. And there's different tools for different things. You got rope, you've got torches, you got all this other stuff. And then I love this here, right? Potions last 1 watch unless otherwise noted, which I love, because it really makes you want to, go for a long duration. I think the death of long duration buffs was terrible for the game.
You said that on a stream and it influenced this game a bit because I was like, you know what? Yeah, I should have a couple more long duration buffs as high level spells.
Yeah,
I don't think you should have a ton of them active at once, but
no,
I like that.
There's a limit. There's
the
a
cleric
limit.
can cast a high level spell that's just okay, you're just better for the rest of the day. And it's that. I think that feels awesome.
Right. And by the way, another way to do it, if you want to do that, is to give clerics and mages powerful spells, but give them expensive material components. And
that's a thing that I wanted to do at some point, but I think it ended up not panning out. What does come up a lot is crafting scrolls of higher level spells. Because here's something that's always bugged me. I don't like that you can learn a spell well enough to cast it every day before you can make a scroll of it. I think the scroll should come first, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Okay. You have to.
It's easier to craft to spend all this time and materials creating the ability to cast the spell once than to master it to the point that you can just cast it over and over with your mana. I think that makes sense, and I think it's more satisfying gameplay wise.
Right.
Because it gives you goals to that you want to craft. It makes you want to invest in crafting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me in 3rd edition, it was all about Pathfinder 2 has this really, I think, horrible process where you never find scrolls of spells until you already could cast them, and that's very underwhelming. And some of my we've told this story on stream before, but one of our favorite stories of all time was they had a level 5 or something party, level 6 party, and they found a scroll of Circle of Death, which was an AoE death spell basically from 3rd edition.
I remember, I vaguely know that from 5th edition, where it's this is just a higher level fireball, except the area of effect is 10 times as big. That's
right.
Well,
in 3rd edition, it was you rolled a number of D4, and that's how many hit dice were affected, and each creature starting from the origin point would make a fort save, and if they failed the fort save, they died. And then, but whether they passed or failed, it ate out of that total hit die pool. So if you rolled, 40 hit dice, it would blow outward. And if you had 8 hit die creatures, you would probably hit a maximum of 5 of them. But they all had to make a fort save or die. And I remember the group was level 5. So that's a level 6, so you have to be level 11 or something to cast that. And this is a level 6 party. And
I love handing out big.
Oh, they walked around like it was a tactical nuke. And to be fair, it was a tactical nuke. And and then they went down to this dungeon level that was higher level than them, and they found this chamber where this Minotaur clan was layered, and they were kind of battling each other, and they were oh, we better avoid that. And then someone was actually, and then they started scheming about how they were going to basically funnel all the Minotaurs into one chamber and then drop the tactical nuke.
Also, I like how that spell sounds if you're standing in the area and you roll more hit dice than you're expecting, you can just kill yourself.
Yes. Fantastic. All right, super chat from Tundle is coming in with the gripe. All right. Tundle says, all right,
damage types?
All right, time for my gripe. What's with having 9 damage types? What is the point of damage types except to make the pyromancer in the party feel bad for a fight? How do they serve the game?
You remember that thing that was mentioned earlier in the stream where you're oh, well, this fight is probably really hard for a party of all wizards. If we had a party of all fighters, it'd be easy. Let's come back later. Damage types do that. If you're if you're dealing with a enemies that resist magic, and you're like, let's come back later because we're all wizards. That's the thing damage types do, basically. That, and they're also just like, I like them for simulationist reasons. I don't like having a ton of damage types. There's like 9 is a pretty conservative number to cover like all possible kinds of damage. It's I
don't know what the exact right number is. I think Fabula Ultima
There's
uses
really...
7 or 8, and I think that's a fine number.
Yeah.
I don't know.
There's also not a ton of immunities in the Bestiary. Like, a Lich might be like, might resist toxic damage by like 3 damage. So you deal 5 damage to a Lich, it's 2 if it's toxic damage. Which it's I don't think it's a huge deal. I do like, there's also a couple monsters that like have unique effects if you hit them with a specific damage type. Probably not as many as there should be. I should include more of those.
Yeah, again, I don't know exactly what the number is, but like I think somewhere in the
I also just think it feels lame if you're like, I'm going to use my crushing damage because that's good against skeletons, and the GM's like, oh no, this game doesn't have like damage types. It's the same damage as a sword. I think that's lame.
Well, I think having the damage types matters for a certain amount of tactical play, right? Like again, I mean, if you really want to,
it also contributes to that. Yeah, the main reason I like it is that thing where you get different like variants out of like how difficult an encounter is based on your party. And, like, here's the thing: making the pyromancer in the party feel bad for a fight is that's kind of desirable to me. If as long as that fight isn't mandatory. If the party is like, oh well, our pyromancer would be pretty bad for that fight, then that's a good incentive to go do something else, or just like, enter that fight knowing it's going to be harder for you. Because one of the things, like, I want players to approach this somewhat like an OSR game where you're thinking like as a team, where it's like, okay, here's a monster that's immune to physical damage. That's not there to make the fighter feel bad. That's there to make the whole team feel bad, because they're like, we would really love if our fighter could hit this monster. Because that would be great for everybody.
I'm so on board with everything that you're saying, for sure.
Thank you.
And again, the problem is, well, it's a whole diatribe, but like, to put it summarily, my ideal goal of a D&D game, what I love is, I love dungeons and I love, that old, kind of style play. And as a GM, I build a level and it's just full of constructs, right? And the fighters can't hit them and the rogues can't sneak attack them or whatever like that. But when I love the idea that the party goes and finds like, the deconstructinizer, and it's like a construct bane warhammer, and it gets past that immunity, and like the party works together to get that, to give it to the fighter, and now the fighter can go and they can go to that level and they can kick ass, and it feels like a triumphant party moment. Like those are like my favorite moments in D&D games, for sure. So equipment real quick. You have armor, which basically gives you resistance to certain types of damage. Body armor prevents blade damage. Shield armor gives you +1 resistance to range damage. Helm gives you +1 resistance to crushing damage, but they all do give you weakness to lightning damage. So if you're wearing body armor, shield, and helm, watch out.
I also want to mention, to like reply to Tundless, and like, I think like Tundless's criticism is actually entirely valid. I agree with it. I just think that the reasons to include it outweigh the like criticism.
I also agree with just some guy with a top hat. Also, damage types give importance to versatile characters who can target weaknesses instead of focused on hyper specialized characters. And I agree with you as well.
Yeah, I also enjoy, like, here's the thing: if you're specialized in one damage type, and that's like your character concept, it feels bad to run into like someone who like negates that in the moment. But I think it feels good on like a campaign-wide context, where if that never happened, it would give less texture to like that class fantasy, no one plays a pyromancer and goes, I'm only going to take fire spells, and then expects that the GM is just going to never throw anything with fire resistance at them.
I think you're giving people too much credit with that statement.
Plenty of people do that.
I think plenty of people do. I think plenly of people on Reddit are complaining right now that the GM put anything in the game.
I think it's there's also the fact that most players won't end up doing that anyway here. You have to try to do that in Tactiquest. Where, like, if you're a Rune Blade, you're going to have multiple damage types. Unless you really go out of your way to be like, I just want to be a fire guy. And if you do that, I think it's actually fulfilling your, like, class fantasy to occasionally run into the consequences of that.
Yep, I completely agree.
Yep. Which is part of why armor gives you weakness to lightning damage, which is an extremely rare damage type for enemies to have. But when it does happen, you're like, oh fuck! I'm a big heavy armor knight. This is my hard counter.
Right.
I have to run up and kill them before they boil me in my armor.
So as Dungeon World teaches us, one of the GM moves is show a player a downside to their race, class, or equipment. And and that is definitely that.
You're selling me on Dungeon World.
Well, the good news is they're making Dungeon World 2 right now.
I've heard of that, yeah.
Yeah, so Luke Crane bought the license from Sage and Adam, and so they're not involved in the project at all. And they're very much clearly saying this is not Dungeon World 2nd edition. It's like Dungeon World 2. They're trying to, like, kind of create almost an entirely new game, because they're like, we have Dungeon World. If people want to go play Dungeon World, they can go play Dungeon World. So I thought that was really interesting. But yes, it is pretty cool. It's a lot of fun.
I also think, like, in practice, most of the time, if you're playing Tactiquest and you run into something that, like, resists cold damage and you're a wizard, you have more options than just, like, hitting them with cold damage. Almost, like, 99% of the time, it's going to lock out one of your options. It's not going to lock out most of your options. There are, like, monsters with armor that resist blade damage or crushing damage, which is going to make, your marshals feel bad. But I also think marshals have enough options to overcome that.
So we can just see
the end of my spiel.
So we could just see here that, every weapon has a sort of a special quality.
Yes.
And that makes them a little bit different. And you could also see that, the sword lets you attack additional targets. The dagger sets up next people to attack them because it makes them vulnerable. You get bonus damage if you're basically flanking with a dagger. Hammer can strike and shove people. So if you strike people,
these are all a big action and a small action.
Right, because it's a special.
You take that one fighter ability that lets you just do it, like, on your attack for free.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point out that, the type of weapon you choose also kind of gives you some different options as well through
it's basically an extra, like, at will power. One thing that I do kind of wish I had done a little more was, like, give a few more, like, at wills for various classes, but it's good enough. I might adjust that at some point.
So before we get to monsters, I just want to really quickly touch on rest and healing. We've talked about this, throughout the course of the stream, so I don't think it's going to be, like, too much, but it's really important to note here that basically you cannot long rest, full heal when you are out in the wilderness or the dungeon, or even if you're, like, at camp. You can only do it in a town or a PC's home base, large fortified camp of an allied faction. Basically, you need to go back to some form of civilization. And as you put it here, you have to spend, like, not just a night, but several nights recovering. And that's the only way that you can.
A day and a night again.
Yes.
The reason I went with that was actually just because I wanted to give. Initially, it was just a night in a town, but I wanted to have it be, like, a natural opportunity to be like, oh, I'm a crafting class. I'm gonna do some. I'm gonna craft a spell scroll over here because we have to stay an extra day anyway.
Yep. So very, very cool stuff. And then this gives you back all your hit points, all your abilities that have a limit once per safe rest, all your mana, and it removes all your strain. If you're taking a night's rest out in the wilderness, one, it costs you 1 supply, which is that sort of generic abstracted quantum camping resource. Food, water, tents, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But you only get half your hit points back. You only remove a single point of strain, and you only get back half of your mana. So, there's definitely a resource constraint here, and you can't just simply, rest a full outside of the dungeon and then go back in the next day.
One of the things that I'm very happy with here is the just the fact that, like, if you're a caster and you only get back half of your, like, max mana on these travel rests, I like when casting a big spell is like, it's not just a today problem, it's also a tomorrow problem. Because, you take a rest and you're still not up to full because you burned through your entire mana supply, last fight. Unless you're resting in a town, of course.
Yep. And again, kind of democratizing healing here. You can see that any PC can spend 1 minute to apply first aid to themselves or another PC. This gives them back 6 hit points and adds 1 strain. Almost all healing abilities increase a PC strain. Healing searches. If a PC strain is full, they can no longer benefit from any strain increasing ability, and they will die if something forces them over their max strain. Also, as an evil GM, I would totally have monsters or abilities, especially things like traps that don't deal hit point damage, they deal strain damage, and that's terrifying.
That is really scary because I think it's in the combat section. I thought it was here, but if you get forced over your max strain, it is in this.
No, you die. You die. like so. For example, if I'm fighting an incorporeal undead, maybe they don't do hit point damage. Maybe they do strain.
There's an undead that makes you take strain.
There you go. See, there we go.
There's like the bestiary has like, certain monsters have this little like warning sign tag next to their name to denote like, this monster is like especially deadly in some way. And there are a few monsters that do it, but like mostly it's undead. Mostly it's undead that do nasty things that aren't just like your standard combat abilities.
And I'm completely here for it. So we're actually going to kind of skip the combat section. I do think that the one thing I do want to call out is the initiative order, the turn order. But I mean, I don't want to go through all of like the different actions and hit points, and temporary hit points, and damage type, and all this other stuff.
You pick aggressive or cautious. So you go before enemies but get less actions, or after enemies but get more actions. And a nice side effect that I stumbled into of this system is when players get to pick what order they go in, they start like doing teamwork way more than when they're just like waiting for their turn to come up.
And to be clear, a couple things. Number one, you always get what's called a big action on your turn. That would be equivalent to a standard action. And then you have a move action, lets you move your number of squares. You always get one of those. The small actions is everything else. And in fact, some of those special actions we saw take a big action, combine it with a special action. Some of those rune things that we were looking at, the rune blade, used small actions. And another thing to note is that this only changes this on the first round, right? So like in later rounds, everybody just gets one. So it's not like you're stuck having no small actions for the entire fight. It's just basically on that and I like the date. I love that you broke this down between first and all other rounds. And I think that's really, really good design.
Thank you. Because if you like, if you delay your turn to get extra actions, that's not costing you anything on later rounds. It only costs you anything in the first round.
Yeah, totally. So I just wanted to call this out because I thought this was pretty clever. And again, again, we're not rolling for combat, so this is great. We just basically go, okay, combat is starting. All right, who's being aggressive and who's being cautious? It's like you did. Okay, great. All right, the monsters, they attack. The early monsters. All right, aggressive PCs go next. All right, most of the enemies go next. Then the cautious PCs and anybody who's going really late. And then we get back into the regular cycle.
Every monster is in the middle there unless they explicitly say like they act early or late.
Right. And that's just a great balance of dichotomy. It avoids any sort of sorting initiative order stuff, which I hate.
Fucking hate sorting initiative. Oh man. I hate rolling initiative.
I hate
fifth edition or any game that works like
I hate it so much. It's the
I
one
used to not mind it, and then I started playing games.
Yes.
The thing that made me hate it was playing Knave, where you roll a d6, and if you get 3 or lower, enemies go first. If you get 4 or lower, 4 or higher, players go first. And it was so It
Right.
cut out like 5 minutes for every fight.
Oh,
It's so nice.
it's the worst. And in fact, again, I don't know if it was like it wasn't just our feedback, but we talked about when Fabio Ultima, when the game creator, he has an initiative system, and we were basically like, we were both,
I remember.
we're like, we hate this, and we're just gonna like let the party go first, and like unless the villain goes first, and that's not the official rule, but it is basically in his document that is like rules that you should use, and it's not like the official rule yet, but he's like basically it will be. So that's very fantastic.
Tumbliz says cautious stance seems real optimal for almost every class given the prevalence of small actions. I had a player come to me with that feedback, and they were like, "Hey, all my players are taking cautious." And I was like, "Are you starting your enemies within range of the players where they can get an attack in on the first turn?" And they said no. And then I said, "Do that." And then they came back to me and were like, "Okay, yeah, it works fine if they have to choose like, okay, do I get extra actions or do I not let the enemies come up and hit me?"
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going first is really strong. So it's fine for cautious like initiative to give you a big reward. Because like if you can just choose to act first all the time, that should come with a heavy cost. Because it's just a whole extra turn.
So real quick before we hop over to the bestiary, I just want to point out that there is a whole section here on combat about hit points, a lot of 4th edition lingo here, pull, push, slide. Although you did add collision, which is like the new thing that people are all about. Draw Steel's about collision.
That's only on like specific types of force movement that specify collision. Like if something says like slide 6 squares, that doesn't do any damage unless it says slide 6 squares to do 2 collision. Because I don't want it to be like a baked in thing to all force movement.
But you talk about area of effect and lights and some of the status effects that are in the game. For example, if you're blind, all attacks and abilities have reach range reduced only to the adjacent squares. What a great way to handle blind, by the way.
Thank you.
That's just brilliant.
In fourth edition, emphasis on like high ground. I love like verticality and because it gives you an easy way to make like terrain that you want to be on. So they're just inherent bonuses for being on high ground.
Is that written here? Is that under status?
Up. It might be down. I swear there's like verticality here. Yeah, it's up.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, because here we go. No, that's just ranged attacks get better range.
This page. Height, flying, falling, elevation. There it is.
Range attacks have -2 and -4 from foes a short or tall height above the characters. Range characters from a short or tall height have +2 or +4 squares.
Yeah.
So
I think you also just get a damage. Does it not say that? I swear it's.
That's what I was looking for. A damage bonus. It doesn't say. I don't see one, but maybe it is there. We just don't see it. In any case.
Oh, I need to put that in there. That's how I've been running it. Oh no.
Oh no. But in any case, you got difficult terrain, you got area effects, you got your status effects. But again, I really do like the way that you handle blind here.
Thank you.
Resistances, weaknesses, all that other stuff. We talked about, you briefly mentioned this, but PCs at 0 hit points are fallen and can't act in combat until healed, which usually costs strains. Fallen PCs at max strain can be treated with first aid outside of combat to get brought back up to 1 hit point only. When one or more PCs have fallen, their allies fight more desperately. If a PC's turn passes while they're fallen, they choose one ally whose next attack deals an extra point of damage. When the PCs win a foe, usually by reducing all foes to 0 hit points, enemies that are sapient people are usually driven off or captured, and the PCs take any treasure they are carried. Feral monsters are usually slain, rewarding monster parts. So basically, the initial assumption is that you're not necessarily literally butchering all the foes.
I hate the thing in where it's like, oh, we're playing a bunch of heroic, good-aligned characters who, we got inconvenienced by some bandits, so we slaughtered every single one of them and didn't think about it again. And that happens like every, that's just another Tuesday for us. Another 6 or 7 people for,
Yeah, so I love how like consequences and tone immediately shift the narrative of a game. So in Torchbearer, when you engage in a combat, or a conflict, your actions will decide what kind of conflict you go into. And you cannot die unless the PCs choose to engage in a kill conflict. And a kill conflict is you're like, we don't want these people to rout. We don't want these people to run away. We don't want to capture these people. We are trying to kill them. And if you, the PCs choose that, then even if you win the combat, if you took some quote unquote damage, then your consequences include up to you getting killed. If you choose any other form if you choose any other conflict, you literally cannot be killed in that conflict, even if you lose it completely. And suddenly PCs are very much more like, we are just going to try to drive them off. I
like that so much more than just like every fight is to the death, even if it's over something that we should not be murdering people for.
Yes.
It's like, this villain was committing a little bit of tax fraud. Let's chop him up.
Now, obviously, that also means that if the PCs do choose to engage in a kill conflict, right, they're putting they are very willingly and openly and with foreknowledge of forethought, of malice of forethought, acknowledging we could die in this fight or we could suffer very grievously, but we are okay with those stakes because this is the guy who killed my father. He prepared to die. And I'm willing to die for this.
Because I like when death is like a player choosing to escalate, or occasionally like having a really scary monster or a really dangerous villain who's just like, no, this guy is out to kill you. But that's like out of the ordinary.
Yes,
where it raises the stakes for that combat specific. Like Undead. Undead will try and kill you.
Exactly. Well, yes. So Undead are a great example of this. In fact, the first time in Torchbearer, you can see this actually on YouTube. The group fell down a shaft and they landed in a ancient tomb, and the skeletal guardians came to attack them. And they were like, okay, well guys, we can't try to kill them because we learned from the demo session, from the example session, that killing things is rough. And then someone's like, wait a second, but these are undead. Can we even drive them off? And it was like, oh yeah, this is like old school. Like they're immune around. They're like, I guess we have,
fight to the death.
And they're like, I guess we have to flee, right? Because we're not willing. And so they ended up running away from the undead because they couldn't make them flee and they weren't willing to fight to the death. So they ran away. And like somebody at the end was like, I've never been so afraid of undead since like the 80s when I used to play BX D&D. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. So I'm a big fan of what you're talking about here about victory. And also this line here, right? Retreat. You can flee combat at any time as long as there is a path to do so. The enemy continues to remain a threat. It's not like it's like, it's the enemy's defeated because you fled. It's like, no, it's still there. But it's also not like you're going to but for all intents and purposes, you have gotten away and you're going to lose progress. There's going to be a consequence to, your situation. You have to leave the adventure site, or if you might end up in a random hex in the wilderness. There's a consequence that is going to carry on. It's not a free lunch. And I think that's really important too. So good stuff here.
Like the first die roll in the system is
the random hex to determine where you go.
Yeah.
Do you ever see the Pros D Euro game versus American?
I've seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. And at the end with the Euro game, he's like, now you can use the dice and mark a 1 next to the player who has the highest point score. And that's the only time you use the dice.
You don't roll the dice.
And you don't roll the dice. Yes. And then it's like the American trash game is like,
that's this game. You don't roll the dice.
The American roll 37 dice to determine your total dice score.
Like, I think the main thing dice are used for in the system are random encounters and loot tables.
Yeah. And I was going to say,
I love those.
Before we hop over to the Bestiary. Yeah, so you can see here's some D8s and D10s and D4s for some random treasure type tables here.
Oh yeah, I don't need the dice to tell me whether I lose my turn in a fight, but you can pry my encounter tables out of my cold dead hands.
And so again, there's some other stuff here that we skipped: crafting rules, some stuff about travel and exploration, about how the hex crawls work, the aforementioned random encounters, like long duration ailments. Again, using stages. This is straight out of 4th edition D&D as well. Actually, technically, it's out of the Star Wars Saga system from late 3rd edition. But
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah,
I thought I came up with this, but no.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, then never mind. Never mind. It's a janitor original. And then you even have a section here at the end about, it's very, unfinished as you note, but you start to talk about creating hex crawls and adding points of interest and different.
Yeah, I want to have a nice, robust, like, here's how to make a setting section in this. It's not done yet, but like, I want it to be because sandboxes don't come supernaturally to everybody.
Right.
You know, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I'll just plot out scenes like it's, you know, like it's a movie, and you can't blame them for that because that's how like most of the media people are exposed to.
Correct. Right.
And it's also not always clear how to make a sandbox work, but
yeah,
I think it's the ideal way to run a game. Maybe not like objectively, but like this is what the system is concerned with, and I hope it gets more people to run sandboxes because I love them.
Yeah, I mean, I it's definitely my favorite. I mean, now to be clear though, I will say this. I have run a lot of sandbox games in my time, and they do have, we have a term that we call it white binder. And it was basically a sandbox campaign I had that basically the party never really got anywhere. They just ended up kind of roaming the wilderness a lot. And it was like a lot of random encounters. And we called it the white binder campaign because it was in a white binder that I had. And it became kind of a running joke because it was kind of an example of where all this like, oh, look at all these random tables and look how cool this game is. And look at this cool new OSR product that has all these random tables and all these Oracle tables. And you never have to make any decisions again. It's all just random. And it turns out sometimes just random can end up feeling like a bunch of random nonsense, you know?
I think you should never, like, if you're running like a sandbox, I don't think you should ever like use a generic random encounter table. Like, whatever encounter table you're using should have all of the local factions on it, or most of them, so that you can run into them and like that'll change the course of your campaign. Because it's not just, oh, here's a d6 like orcs. It's 1d6 of like the orcs that live over here in this tower that want specific things.
Right.
And if you run into them, it'll affect whatever the like story is with those orcs, and not just be like a waste of time to drain your resources.
By the way, we have a entire video live stream on dynamic random encounter tables that you should check out.
I need to get around to that one, apparently.
But it's basically the idea that random encounter tables should represent sort of the status of your campaign and region. And I've always said that as players, I love letting my players become sort of aware, either through lore or rumors or evidence. Like, for example, the first time the ranger sees tracks and realizes that there's owlbears in this region, I'll tell them, okay, guys, fill in on the random encounter table that you guys are tracking, which is mostly blanks, but that, 12 through 20,
oh, that's fun.
12 through 20 is owlbears. And then later on, when they drive the owlbears out of the woods or they kill the great owlbear lord, or
I've never thought of doing that, but I like that.
And giving the player, like, it's very satisfying as a player, especially if you've encountered these owlbears.
Fill in your own random encounter table. Oh, that's genius.
But then when they kill the owlbears, I tell them, erase it, like that. And now when I roll, you clear this
threat.
And then I'll roll the encounter and we'll roll an 18 and the party will look and I'll be like, well, that would have been owlbears, but you guys killed them all. So no, nothing happens, and that feels so satisfying as a player. Very satisfying
for the GM to be like, this would have been a dangerous thing, but you guys,
you guys took care of business. Right. You did the thing.
It's like, all our adventuring is like paying off a little bit.
Right. Or there was another one where there was like a group of elves that were pretty hostile. And so like if you encountered them, they were going to attack you. And then the PCs made allies of the elves, and it didn't change they still appeared on the encounter table, whatever X% of the time. But now when they appeared, they offered, succor and advice and ally, you know what I mean? Because now they had made allies of them. So it was like running into friendlies in the wilderness instead of foes.
Yeah. What was I saying? I'm really surprised that the chat didn't get a bunch of like, oh my god, random encounters. Are you kidding me? When I mentioned the system has them. I don't know. This is
the Night's Last Call audience. We like
good
random
audience,
encounters.
Apparently.
We like random encounters here. All right, so we've got about 15-20 minutes left. So I want to hop over to the Bestiary. So this is the Bestiary. Right. You actually have a pretty lengthy Bestiary here. It's 50 pages. We've got you've got
not done yet.
You've got it broken down the way I like it broken down, which is the 4th edition style, where you've got like, here are your orcs, and it's not just orc, it's 4 or 5 different types of orcs. So if you want to build a cool orc encounter, you can I'm going to use 3 orc bone breakers and 1 orc war priest and an orc tower toppler, and I've got a cool orc encounter that isn't just 5 generic orcs that all do the same things.
That's something I really like. Half this bestiary is people, because I like when I think like fighting other factions is like that creates interesting campaigns for me. Is like I hate when it like when like a bestiary comes out and it's like all monsters and it's like, oh well, what if my players want to fight like the town guard? What if they piss off like the local wizard and or this like bunch of elves, and the bestiary is like, I don't know, make it up.
Right. Whereas like yeah, I mean, like when I was a kid, like everything that you fought for like the first couple levels was basically some sort of humanoid monster.
Right. And like, I don't know what campaigns people are playing where they don't piss off people and have to fight.
So let's talk really quick here. So you talk about the bestiary, but most of the thing is given up to just, the monsters. You have a danger rating, and that goes into how you design a fight. But basically that's roughly how it's CR, if you will. You also have the role, which is again very 4th edition inspired here. Of it, what kind of role is this monster designed to fill within?
These are basically just 4th edition
within the tactical combat space. And I cannot stress to you how useful this is as a GM, as a tool, not only to build encounters, but just to quickly assess what is this monster's role. Literally, what is this monster's role? What is this monster's job in combat? You also have elites, which work in a kind of a super monster, and then a boss, which is a solo monster designed to fight numerous people at once.
The last thing that I wanted, the one nice thing I wanted to say about 5th edition was I like legendary actions.
Okay.
And that's basically how monsters work here. How solo bosses work here is they get extra action, one extra thing they can do at the end of each player turn.
So I'm seeing, and you've got information here about making monsters and, how to, to have humanoids. Here's your humanoid guard. Here's your humanoid conscript. But I'm hearing people say that we gotta look at some other stuff here. Tundless wants us to look at the slimes.
Scroll down to the, boss in this section, the one page lower.
The siege tower?
The legendary warrior.
Oh, the legendary warrior. Okay, here we go. Danger 60. Boss.
I just wanted to show off right up on page. There we go. Yeah, that's the art I wanted to show off the art. I like that art.
Oh, okay. You're trying. Yes. Very cool. Very, very cool. I love it.
But I also wanted to show off the stat block. Now, I like one of the things I want to see more of is like villains that are just like a big, strong fighter guy. I hate that so many a lot of F20 games don't really support. Expect that a big fighter guy is just going to run up and hit things, and I hate that.
Yeah, and that's because though, like if you're playing Pathfinder 2 and you have like a big, fighter guy, they're just going to put him in a wall of stone. There's no save, and then you know what I mean. Like it's and or like they're all going to cast fly and just fly above them and stuff like that.
Everything here is balanced around having no save. So
right, exactly. But again, you can see these stat blocks very easy. They've got hit points. I mean, this is even easier than anything else because my God, there's no dice rolls. So, this thing moves 7 squares. It can move 2 squares immediately after it drops an enemy. It takes 1 less damage from blade damage. Its weakness to lightning. It has a heavy strike, which does 6 crushing damage and gives them dazed 1. Or it can spin in a circle and do 4 damage to all engaged targets. Or as a special action, finisher.
I want to bring up the special action.
Okay.
So one of the things that I was worried about when designing the system was like, oh, well, if there's no dice, combat is going to be like really predictable and solved. And, so what the special moves are to solve that problem where every round the GM picks 1 monster to use their special instead of like a basic action.
So basically you can't Nova.
Yeah.
you can't use everybody's most powerful action all at once.
You just pick 1 monster each round to do something extra cool, and I enjoy how it's I enjoy how what it does to combat because like I think you've like talked about like a tension curve that you've like drawn up a chart for a couple times, and one of the nice things it does is like if you've whittled down and encountered only 1 or 2 enemies, like you're probably going to win, but they still have a couple tricks up their sleeve because, like, if there's 1 guy left, now he can use his special move as much as he wants.
Right. Another option would be, too, like, you could even make it so that, at this, like, maybe, like, I don't know what the average turn length is, but, like, in the first round, you can't use any specials, but maybe like in the second round you can use one, and then like the third round, or you can fourth round you can use two,
scary.
and then you like as the fight goes longer, they can use more and more specials. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just thinking about increasing the tension in the day and late, but they should also be killing enemies as you go on, so it also probably takes care of itself. So great art in all of these little pieces here, and again, just highlighting here how cool this is, because like look at this is dwarves, and you've got a danger 8 geomancer, a danger 6 melee character, a danger 7 shaper. You've got a danger 12, heavy wall guy, a danger 15 big mining drill thing. You have all these different little tools in your toolbox to build a really cool dwarf encounter, and they're going to feel different, and they're not just going to be a bag of hit points that you're going to wade through. And obviously, this is the 4th edition style, but I should also point out that these stat blocks are very, very readable. They're very
thank you so much. When I was making these stat blocks, I was
easy to understand. I mean, it's great.
Going out of the first time I started like drafting up stat blocks, I was like, okay, how much can I get away with cutting so that to like have as little in this stat block as possible, like that isn't like the interesting stuff.
Right.
And some of them still end up really long, but
yeah. And I should also point out that number one, when you have multiple foes in a fight that do things, they don't all have to do like the most crazy special things. Sometimes it's good to just have normal people, but also, these creatures, they're not long for this world. They don't need 7 abilities.
One of my like core design philosophies for this game, almost every monster has one like basic attack and one special attack. And that's it. A lot of them have like passive abilities or, like some big or like something notable on their basic attack. But I think it's more important for a monster to have like one interesting ability that it does every turn than it is to have like 4 different abilities that, as a GM, I don't want to be making too many decisions. You know?
I'm especially when you're using multiple monsters that are different.
Yeah. And so I went out of my way to boil everything down to like, okay, here's a monster, here's its 1 or 2 interesting things, and like everything else gets out of the way.
I love the goblin mounted great snail.
Thank you. Originally there were going to be a lot more like extremely like bespoke silly monsters like that. But they're kind of, I didn't end up doing that. And so, but not, I kept the great snail, so it's just a snail with a bunch of goblins on it.
Yes, it's awesome. So yeah, just very cool art, very cool thing. Oh, we got our frog locks here, our croakers. Oh, no art for the croakers?
Not yet.
Oh no.
It's a big book. I'll get around to it.
All right.
Also, thank you, Thunderless.
But yeah, like if you look at all these things,
I do want to show off the kobold art.
Okay, we'll get there. Like here's a hopping croaker. It's a pest, and it has its tongue, which does some crushing damage and can attack you from far away, but it can also pull you. And it's got its special move to make a big jump, which feels very frog-like. But like this is what I'm talking about. Like this is more about like, oh yeah, that's definitely a frog monster. Oh, you know what this thing probably does? It probably has some sort of tongue attack. Psych, it does. And you're like, yes, cool. This thing is actually doing. This is one of my biggest problem when you start getting some of these books now. They have these monsters, that are just like, looks like somebody just like randomly rolled something out of a table, and you're like, oh, it's the Vetarex, and you're like, I don't know what this thing is supposed to be.
Arbitrary.
Yeah, just totally arbitrary.
There are a few like, made up monsters in this book that are like
sure.
But I try and keep most of it.
Never has art so matched the description before. Cobalt hoplite, tiny warrior peeking out from behind a big shield. Look at that guy. But yeah, very, very cool stuff. Look at the Oh, that's a cool name too. The Cobalt Dracomancer. They even have
like the idea
wings
that,
of flame.
Kobolds have this like, oh, here's a kobold who's like studied how to do dragon stuff, because that's their thing, kobolds. And yeah.
Ooh, speaking of dragons, here's a dragon. Danger 80.
Oh yeah.
100 hit points, speed 8, jets of flame. This is sort of your kind of legendary action thing, right?
Yeah.
Or like lair action.
if you scroll down to like their off turn actions.
Oh, okay, there we go. Off turn actions. Got it. So it takes an off turn action at the end of every PC's turns except right before it's about to go. So it can fly upwards. It can do some damage with its claws. It can leave a jet of flame or shoot a jet of flame.
I like having a dynamic where, like, you know, on the monster's turn, it does something big and super scary, but off its turn, it's mostly just like trying to keep the players on their toes. You know, It's not just standing there getting the shit beat out of it. You know, it's you know, so you still have that, like, oh shit, it's the monster's turn. What's it gonna do? But it's, you know, it's not completely helpless off of its turn.
And yeah, I mean, this is great. The only thing I would change to this, Piro says, wait, so it gets more actions based on the party size? Yes. Which is brilliant design, because that way it can function as a boss.
It's still more dangerous if you have a smaller party, but not by as much.
Yeah. The only thing that I would say is, like, maybe some of these, like, it can't keep using that ability over and over and over again.
I thought about that, but
obviously it's something to track, which I don't like, but like, which is a thing for sure. But like,
I don't like that it. I like that it can use whatever's most tactically advantageous, and I don't think the GM should be tracking like per battle abilities.
I agree. I mean, I completely agree with you.
I get what you mean, though.
I'm just imagining,
make sure it's like doing more than one thing.
Yeah, because I'm just imagining a situation where the GM goes, okay, rending claws, okay, rending claws, okay, rending claws.
That's fine with me, because it's still getting its big action each turn. That's like something much scarier. Like, rending claws isn't supposed to be interesting, because that's what it does off of its turn. You know,
right.
It's not supposed to be like that. That's just its filler action to keep you from, like, you know, getting too relaxed while you're waiting for its real turn to come around. There's the giant that I like.
The giant knight, yeah, that's very cool. Colossal mountain of armor and might lives up to that. I love the perspective there as well.
Thank you.
So that's pretty sweet. And then we've got bugs, slimes. So here are the slimes.
I'm so happy with the slimes. I had so many ideas for, like, what's a texture that a liquid can be, and I just gave all of them to different slimes.
So you've got lazy, slippery, noxious, sticky, acidic, bouncy, ravenous, and unstable.
The unstable one is one of my favorites.
And that by the way, that has the dangerous, which means it basically kind of ignores some of the core assumptions of the game and can, like, really fuck you up.
That basically just means, like, any encounter that can get out of hand is.
And I'm assuming I'm assuming that's because it has the splitting.
Oh yeah, because you can wind up with like 10 of these things if you're not careful.
Yeah, very cool.
So the little danger symbol there is just to, like, let the GM know, like, hey, you know, this isn't a normal monster. Be a little judicious in deciding to use it.
And this gets back to something which, again, I've talked about for years on this channel, which is 3rd edition D&D had this chart which broke down monsters, like encounters. And it basically is the guiding principle for me when I do prep-based games. And to be clear, I don't do as many prep-based games anymore. I just don't have the time, and you know, the juice isn't sometimes worth the squeeze. And by prep-based games, I mean like designing encounters, designing dungeons, right? But it's very fun when you do it. But in this 3rd edition guideline, they talked about the breakdown of, you know, let's say a standard dungeon level. Right. You might have a certain percentage of very easy foes, a certain percentage of very tough foes. And then in the middle, you have foes that are around the level that you would expect them to be for the dungeon. But the biggest portion is monsters, encounters that were classified as very difficult unless you approach it correctly, in which case it becomes kind of manageable or even easy. And I have always loved monsters like slimes in D&D, gray oozes and, you know, ochre, you know, jellies and stuff like that, because it's a puzzle in a sense.
Yeah, I love puzzle monsters.
And I love puzzle monsters too. And I think that, and like, if you go in against a gray ooze and you're like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep hacking at it, or you go up against a black pudding, which splits, and you're like, I'm just going to keep slashing at this thing, and oh, okay, we're dead. Right, because you have to figure this thing out. You have to approach it correctly. I love that.
This is part of why I love OSR games as like my standard D&D type game, is because I think they are uniquely suited to having lots of puzzle monsters. Mm-hmm. I don't have as many of them here, Like there's not anything that's like, you know, in an OSR game, if I made a slime monster, I'd just say, yeah, it's immune to physical damage. You can't kill it with swords.
Right.
That's not what I do here because it's a combat game and you're gonna
Sure.
have a sword. But I like having monsters where like you might have to flee, you might have to like change your approach.
Yep.
You might be really glad that you brought like an oracle who has an ability to just show you the monster stat block.
Absolutely. And this also gets back to why when I talked about, even like in 3rd edition D&D, I always talked about one of the main things that I really don't like about modern adventure design is, number one, we've sort of, you know, we poo-poo this idea that as a player, we know things about a monster. But second is that you fight these really weird monsters and they have like some sort of gimmick or some sort of thing. So they're kind of, I guess, a puzzle monster. And then you literally will never fight that monster ever again. Either because it's a one and done, not like it's a unique monster. It's just like, oh, you fought, you know, you're playing through this adventure path and you fought a green slime or a black pudding. And that was it. There's no more black puddings in this dungeon because we're not going to have all these repeating monsters, and there's no random encounter tables anymore. And by the time this adventure's over, you're 3 or 4 levels higher than a black pudding. So it's not even idea that it could be a challenge. But one of the reasons I like fighting monsters multiple times is because the first time you fight that monster, you're like, you know, getting your ass kicked because you don't know what you're doing. But it's really important for me to have the players have that opportunity to fight that monster again, and maybe even a third time, where now they have that knowledge. They, you know, maybe it's hard earned through getting their ass beat, or maybe they went and said, hey, how do we beat these things? And when they fight it that second or third time, and they have that knowledge, oh, these things don't split if we use cold, or if we use cold, then we can hit them with our swords and they don't split, you know, then you feel very empowered.
I'll talk about the unstable slime. It splits when you hit it with physical damage.
Yep.
If you hit it with non-physical damage, then it absorbs that element. If you scroll down to like, and now it gets a new power, which is, it bloats the stat block a little bit, but like,
I mean, it is supposed to be, you know, kind of a cool set piece encounter, though, you know.
But if you're splitting this thing up and hitting it with different elements, now you've got like different elemental slimes all in the same encounter because you know you.
Wait. So, do the elemental types keep stacking?
No, they like if you hit it with fire, it changes to fire. If you hit it with cold, and it's not fire anymore.
Got it. It does cold damage. So, like literally here, right? Like if it's doing fire damage, it's doing a lot more damage. So you might be like, hey, we don't have, you know, or if it's in lightning mode, you're like, hey, we got a lot of heavily armored people. We got to get it off of lightning because we're getting cooked here.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite monsters in the Bestiary.
The unstable ooze or stable slime.
Yeah.
Very cool.
I also want to answer
Piro's
in the chat.
Piro had a question.
Pirosopus. Do you do knowledge checks in this game like Lancer Scan? No, but there are like various like class abilities that will let you know stuff. Like the Oracle obviously is all about that. That's like his whole gimmick. But there's also like, oh, if you're playing a warrior, you get to see the monster's danger level. Just from looking at them, every monster you encounter, the GM tells you their danger. Because I like the idea that a fighter is like, you know, part of being a good fighter is knowing when fights are worth picking.
Correct.
You know, and if, you know, if the party runs into like a dragon and the GM tells the fighter player, hey, you can tell this thing is danger 80. And then the fighter's like, we got to get the fuck out of here. There's also like, I think Strategist has a perk that lets you like, makes it so that enemy speed is like a variable that you always know. Like anytime you can just ask the GM, hey, what's this monster's speed? And they'll tell you so that you can
make a tactical choice. Yeah.
So you can be like, okay, I'm just out of reach. And you can't do that without a strategist unless you have an oracle, you scan their entire stat block, etc.
Very cool. So I want to take a look before we wrap up here at the ghoul. Ghoul is one of my favorite. I love undead. I've always said before, my favorite monsters are like undead and giants. And I love undead. Ghouls being one of my favorite monsters. I think they're wonderful. And we could see here that they are marked as a danger because you were mentioning before, they have this gruesome feast. So a lot of the undeads have various things like the Shade Stalker can, you know, put the ghost chill on you, and the zombies can give you the necro virus, which can eventually kill you and reanimate you as a zombie. But the ghoul can only use this on a felled PC. So if you get dropped, if they feast on you, you gain a point of strain and you lose half of your max HP until the next time you get back to town and take a full safe rest. And the ghoul regains that much HP. If your max HP is reduced to 0, you die. So if you let the ghouls feed on your felled buddies for a couple rounds, twice, they're dead. Dead. The ghouls ate them.
Yeah.
And that makes ghouls scary in a way that the
it
other
makes ghouls scary. I love when I'm better.
Yeah, in a way.
I
also, by the way, I want to highlight this too. Just from a stats perspective. Speed 8 acts early. That's very scary. And I love ghouls, but I hate paralyzing people. So it's kind of this weird thing. This ghoul doesn't paralyze people. This is fantastic.
Well, look at this. So what Tired does is it makes it so that you basically start each turn having already used up your move action, and you can still move with small actions or other like character abilities.
But it's fine. Like Days in 4th edition was a fine status, right? Where you only got a standard or a move or like you just.
Which is it's a very scary status.
It's still very scary, and it's not
take
stun.
away your fucking turn, and you just have to sit there and hope your allies.
I think removing someone's move action and letting them only use small actions, which, as I recall, lets you move half your speed. That's like a hustle or something, right?
Yeah.
Did I get that right? So I think that's awesome. But the best part about this, though, is it doesn't take away. You still get to attack. You still get to cast a spell. Because the worst feeling is this is how you create this weird death spiral thing, right? Where you like, well, now I can't even fight back. So of course it's going to win. You know, the fight was over before it began.
I like that ghouls are. Hopefully these are like scary in a way that doesn't make them just like unbeatable and like not fun to fight.
All right, so
they probably aren't that fun to fight, but they're probably like.
But like they're not.
Oh God, we're gonna die.
They're not fun to fight in a good way, you know. Like if it's So Tundalus does have a request, which I'll do, just because we had a really good support for this stream, and Level 2 Janitor's been so kind. So we'll do one more here. This is the Mind Muncher, the totally
this
legally
clearly a legally distinct monster.
Clearly not a Mind Flayer.
100% Tactiquest original.
Yes, brain eating squid people from beyond the stars, or the distant future, or deep beneath the waves. All right, so all of the Mind Munchers. By the way, we have 2. So we have the Scion and the Stalker.
I'll probably add like a giant brain thing later.
Oh, good call. Or you could add like kind of like an intellect devourer, right? Like as kind of a Mind Muncher pet. You know, the brain.
That's
brain
a stupid name.
What? The intellect devourer? That's just the name from D&D. You can call it whatever you want. I wouldn't call it that for you have a
various reasons.
You have a monster called Mind Muncher. So domination. When any Mind Muncher fells a creature, that means drops it to 0, it remains conscious at 1 hit point, gains 10 temporary hit points, and is controlled by the Mind Muncher until cured by anything that cures status effectors, or you kill the totally not Mind Flayer. So that is scary. That is awesome, and that is scary. And this is, by the way, so much more fun than I dominate, you make a save, you fail, and you're.
I was a little unsure how to handle these with the like no stuns thing, because like being dominated, that's a stun.
But here's the thing: you got your fight. The alternative would be you'd be laying there unconscious, right? So, and we've accepted that. You know, I don't think people mind losing their turn. It's not the best thing in the world. But if you got to fight your fight and you went down, I think people are okay with that because you feel like, hey, I did my thing and I'm okay.
It's fine to lose your turn if you lose the fight.
You know, it's to quote
that feels a lot less bad.
To quote Sir Alistair Thorne before Jon Snow executes him in Game of Thrones, he says, "I fought, I lost, now I rest." Right? So like there's sometimes there's a moment where like you go down in a fight. I've seen this happen a million times where someone's playing and they're fighting and they're doing their thing, they're killing monsters, whatever, and the fight's going bad, but they go down and they're basically like, "All right, boys and girls, I did what I did. I'm taking a back seat. You guys, good luck." You know, like you're almost like enjoying, like just being like, the tension's off. I did what I had to do. Anyways,
also I really like
the
art. I was going for like a cuttlefish vibe.
Okay,
which are like, because they're these like real life animals that like they're little like octopus things that look kind of like that. But they can like change colors and flash, different colors. And a lot of the time they'll like, flash these patterns at like crabs to like, disorient them. And then they'll eat them. And that felt very appropriate for this monster.
Nin says that when they get dropped, they pull out their phone and get bored. That's fair. So we got the Mind Muncher Scion and the Stalker. One is a Troubler and one is a Striker. Or sorry, Stalker, who's a Striker. They both have the Danger icon because they're both kind of nasty.
Oh, yeah.
So they both... the Scion can hover around the ground, basically. It's resistant to being charmed. It's weak to blade damage because it's just a big squishy
These things
monster.
also have like very low hit points for their danger. These are squishy casters.
Yep.
Oh, and that one's weak to blade damage.
The Psy Beam has pretty good range, does 6 magic damage, and gives the weak status. I don't remember what the weak status is.
It's just like less damage.
Got it. Which is a great way to counteract the fact that these guys have low hit points. Psychokinesis is very low damage, but lets them reposition and slide people around, which could be a lot of fun. And then their special ability, which remember, you can only use one special ability per combat round as the GM's squad.
Yeah.
Use against a target within 9 squares that can see the Scion. If possible, the target immediately takes a big action of the Scion's choice, with the Scion making relevant choices like targeting. Resist as charm. Range is reduced by 4 squares per 1 resistance to charm the target has, and a little bit of a spelling error there. But so basically, if you have no resistance to charm, they can grab you and make you make an attack or a big attack. Basically,
they can just make you attack your ally without like taking away turns.
Okay. Now keep in mind that's the Scion is basically giving up its turn to do that, which is cool. But I also love that if you do have resistance to charm, this becomes a lot less appealing because now suddenly it's much closer range, even down to potentially a range of 1 square, which means adjacent, which is very cool. Tundalus, $5 super chat. This is how you iterate on an iconic, beloved monster design.
Thank you so much.
My hat goes off to you. I agree. I think this is awesome. I absolutely love this domination ability, and I love that this is true for all Mind Munchers. I love when monsters that they're kind of joined together by this kind of universal monster rule.
Oh yeah. I think I've also got like mushroom people in here that have a similar they all have this spore cloud mechanic but interact with it in different ways.
And this person, this is great. I mean, between the slide, the damage debuffer, and then this mesmerize ability, this is very much a mental manipulating troubler. And let's take a look at the Stalker. So again, its passive is it can move 2 squares when it's hit. So very, if you strike it, it's going to fall back. It's, going to disengage. It's also weak to blade damage. A little bit more hit points. Devour Mind is its core ability. 10 blade damage, and it grabs. Target takes another 5 blade damage at the end of each turn while grabbed. So this is the classic, I've grabbed you with my tentacles, and now I'm eating your brain, right? And this is one of those things where I play a lot of Magic the Gathering. And one of my favorite things in Magic the Gathering, I've talked about this a long time, is when the mechanics tell a story.
Tell a story. Yeah. That's a big, that's a big focus for me. And it also helps a lot with just it makes it easier to design monsters almost, because I'm like, okay, what should this monster do? Well, what does it do in like a fictional term? And I just try and, absolutely that into mechanics. And
absolutely. And so between
there you go.
You give this thing a name, Devour Mind, and then all you do is give it mechanics, but immediately everyone who reads this is going to get the story, right? They're going to understand, I got it. Tentacled monster. He's got his stalks. He's grabbing their mind and he's eating their brain or ripping apart their head. I get it. Okay, cool.
Yeah. I hate when you fight a monster that's a really iconic kind of creature in D&D history, and it's just bite claw, and then
bite claw. That's the classic.
I think it's the other way around, claw bite. Yeah, whatever.
Claw bite. Yeah. I agree. I think but I also just love that this very clearly, like I said, sets the tone for it. And let's see what their special ability is. The Predator's Lure. 1 target within 9 squares that can see the Butcher, but apparently Stalker.
Whoops. It used to be called the Butcher. I changed it to Stalker because it might not always murder you.
Got it. Is pulled up to its current speed, and it ignores any slows from mental effects. That's a little wonky, but I understand why that's there.
Yeah, it's if you're slowed by the the Scion or whatever,
right?
Then this shouldn't
make it harder.
Yeah.
Yes,
That
but
should make it harder to
if you're slowed by ice or something, then it would. But it is
Yeah.
it is a little wonky. But anyways, towards the stalker. If it ends this move, engage with the stalker. The stalker makes a devour mind action against it. So basically, it brings you in with its cuttlefish lure, and then you find yourself being, and then it starts eating your brain, which is fantastic. And again, you're pulled 2 less squares for each 1 resistance to charm. So hard to pull you in from a distance. But keep in mind, it's only your speed. So if your speed's only 5 or 6, if you have resistance 2 to charm, you're going to be much better off against these mind munchers. So maybe you should go find some cool magic items that give you resistance to charm before you try to take on a mind muncher lair. I love these, again, it's not, with names like Mind Munchers and art like this, I'm not thinking of this in like a super serious way. I'm thinking about this in a Final Fantasy. And by the way, Final Fantasy can tell very mature stories, but I also, when I play Final Fantasy, I'm totally fine fighting a floating knife and fork, like it's, or like a big banana or something,
that's a little too silly for this. I think the silliest you get is the giant snail with goblins on it.
Right. But you know what I mean? There's a certain style and aesthetic here, which I think it matters. It doesn't all have to be grim, dark, super gore, Mork Borg. Oh my God, how much edgier could we be? We go to 11, none more black. Games can still have a fun lightheartedness without being silly, is what I'm trying to get at. So, what version is the Tonberry being added to the Bestiary?
I think that might require a little more legal legal distinction, like I'm doing with the Mind Muncher here.
Yeah, so I'm going to let you go, but before we do, I just want to really quick, you do call out here some inspirational credit, some TTRPGs and non-TTRPGs. So you talk about Final Fantasy 1, which awesome. 4 and 5. 5 is a standout. A lot of people would probably put 1, 4, and 6, but you put 5, which is interesting.
6 would be great, except I hate the combat. It's so annoying.
Okay.
5 is like for me, 5 is the best one. I'm more nostalgic for 1, but like 5 is the best one.
Right. I love 1, but I fully admit it has its flaws and limitations,
Most things people hate about 1, I think are great. I love the lack of auto targeting.
Oh, me too. Were you part of the conversation when we were talking about my playthrough of 1?
I was.
And somebody was like, "Oh, you should totally play this version, the Pixel Remaster." And I was like, "Well, no, they're like, it gets rid of that annoying, where you attack a blank space." I'm like, "No, that's like my favorite part."
That's what makes the combat interesting.
That's what makes the fighting interesting. Yeah.
The other thing about 1 that I wanted to capture with this was when you're on your way back from a dungeon and you're low on supplies and you're oh man, just got to make it back to town before I get ambushed by anything.
Right, please.
I love how Final Fantasy 1 has a lot of variance in random encounter difficulty, because you're walking through a dungeon, that random encounter flash happens, you're like, oh fuck, what's it gonna be? And it might be one little guy that you're like, oh okay, then we can deal with this. And it might be 10 of those guys and you're like, oh fuck,
you're like, oh, this is the worst thing ever. You're like, oh my God.
And I love the how much of a gap that is. It feels a lot more grounded in that, it feels like the world isn't tailored to you in a way that I love, and I wanted to capture with Tactiquest.
Yeah, the other thing that I really like about Final Fantasy 1 is it's very rare that a encounter will kill you, random encounter. A boss might, but the thing about the random encounters is they wear you down.
I also really like how boss fights in Final Fantasy 1, they're kind of de-emphasized. You don't want to save all your spells for the boss, because the random encounters are almost as dangerous as the boss. Right. They can be sometimes.
The bosses are, in fact, I've played every version of Final Fantasy 1, basically. I mean, I played the NES version. That's when I originally played it. But I played Final Fantasy Origins when it came out on the PlayStation. I played Dawn of Souls on my Game Boy Advance. And I know
the GBA version.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the GBA version myself. That's the one that added MP, I think, which just makes the game jokingly easy. Also, you could have it also had potions, high potions, ethers, elixirs, all the things that just make
it sands off all of the rough edges, but the rough edges are the main thing Final Fantasy 1 has going for it.
But I also like being able to play it on my my Game Boy Advance or my DS, so I played it anyways. But anyways, the the thing about it is, like, in the later versions, they gave the boss monsters more hit points. That was one of the changes they made because they wanted to make the boss fights
I don't like that.
bigger and more dramatic. And I don't like that either. I think
Yeah,
the challenge of Final Fantasy is the dungeon. You know,
Yeah.
it's getting through all those encounters while also not having an auto mapper and also trying to find the treasure and the cool swords and all that other stuff. So it's pretty cool there. You have Legend of Zelda, specifically 1.
Yes. 1 is my favorite.
Okay. Okay. My favorite is Link to the Past, but that's interesting. Why 1?
A couple. 1 is like mostly nonlinear. It has like
Sure.
a lot of like, oh, you still need this dungeon item to get to like this later dungeon, but it's not like a specific linear order. You know, you can stumble into dungeon 3 and do it before dungeon 1, and they're numbered, but they're not like forcing you to do it in that order.
Correct.
Or at least not very much.
No.
I also just think the combat is better with like you have the stab instead of like that like sword slap thing that like later Zeldas do. I think the stab is so much more satisfying. It feels more deliberate. It's slower. I like how the shield is like automatic instead of having to block because it rewards you for keeping your cool. And like, you know, if you run in and start flailing your sword at things, now your shield isn't up because it's not up while you're attacking. And it's always up while you're not attacking. So it rewards you for like being patient and like being decisive instead of just like attacking all the time. You're like, okay, this is my opportunity to attack. I'm gonna stab right now, instead of like just running up and waving your sword at it.
And then for TTRPG influences, we've talked about some of these. Draw Steel, Vagabond. That's the one from
Indestructible. Yeah.
Indestructible. Yeah.
That's mostly there because that designer has a Vanguard class, which I basically I don't think it like works exactly the same, but the concept of like, oh, here's your heavy armor knight that is like explicitly your tank role that's separate from the fighter class. That's something this game has. If you're a fighter, you're not like a 4E defender, but if you play a Vanguard, now you're like a 4E defender.
And we see Worlds Without Number from Kevin Crawford, and we see Dungeons and Dragons 3E and 4E.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not know Grave.
Grave is a knave hack.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I was like, is this
designed for Dark Soul? When I say I run OSR games, I'm saying I run Grave. I've run a campaign of it for like 2 years.
Okay.
And it's like filled with my house rules. It's extremely elegant. It has this mechanic where so you have your item slots, and every item slot you leave empty gives you stamina, which is where I got that equip slot thing.
Got it.
And it like rewired my brain when I read it because I was like, oh, that's such a nice way to have like, you know, the same character could be like this lightly armored duelist or this heavily armored tank, using the same mechanics.
Booga Bugs,
without having to like pick a different. I like Grave a lot.
Booga Bug says I'm a part of that campaign. It's legit AF.
it's oh yeah.
You know, I will say, you know, I have been sort of outside of the OSR space for a while.
When I say OSR, it's like a new SR game.
It's a new SR. But what does new SR mean to you?
It means it's not a retro clone.
Okay. But
or original D&D, you know?
Right.
Or like, yeah.
But all right.
Like old school Essentials is OSR. New SR is like, it's fuzzy. I also call it an OSR game.
Yeah, it's. You know. I think it's fuzzy as well too. But yes, I can understand. Like, what do you think of Shadow Dark?
I don't like Shadow Dark.
Okay.
I think it emphasizes die rolls too much, which I don't think an OSR game should do because if you're rolling dice in an OSR game, you probably screwed up, or at least that's how I want it ideally. I don't like the roll to cast spells. I think
that's my least.
I think that's a less interesting. Like, oh, I have this spell that'll solve our problem, but it might blow up in my face if I roll that. I don't think that's as interesting of a decision as like, oh, I have this spell that'll solve our problem, but I can only cast 2 spells a day.
So you know, Kelsey has several influences, and one of them is Dungeon Crawl Classics, and there's a lot of things I don't like about Dungeon Crawl Classics, but the one thing I don't like about Dungeon Crawl Classics is
the one thing you don't like or do like.
The one thing I do not like is that that's where it really popularized the roll
to cast.
Roll to cast.
I don't mind it as much in Dungeon Crawl Class. I've never played it. I want to play it, but I don't. it doesn't rub me the wrong way in Dungeon Crawl Classics, because in Dungeon Crawl Classics, like, the whole fucking point of the game is like gonzo, like, weird moments, right? It's not really an OSR game necessarily. It feels more like Dungeon Crawl Classics feels like it knows what it wants to be and is that. In a way I respect, even if I don't like Roll to Cast.
Tundalus is right. I also don't like the funnel, but like I consider the funnel to be like independent from the actual mechanics of the game. Yeah.
How do you feel about Mighty Deeds? Because those are like the thing from Dungeon Crawl Classics that I think is like really that I really like and want to like bring into my OSR games. Like...
So it's been a while. So Mighty Deeds let you. It's like when you roll. You get
basically every attack you make, you get a random chance to do some like non-attack action, and you get a maneuver, but you don't pick it from a list. You just like tell the GM what you want to do. Like, oh, I want to swing my sword through these two guys, or I want to, pin this guy to the wall with my spear, or I want to kick this guy off the balcony while I'm attacking him.
So I'm kind of torn on that, because when I run OSR games, like if you played like some of the patrons played Shadow Dark with me, which I didn't actually know the rules.
Actually, you know what? I remember what you mentioned at the start of the stream, where you were like, the more decision points a game has, the less I like the randomness.
Right. But like, so like, for example, we were playing Shadow Dark, but again, I didn't know the rules. We were just playing Shadow Dark, but I didn't actually own a copy of the rules. So I was just winging it. Like somebody threw a spear and they rolled max damage, and I was like, oh yeah, you kill the goblin, it goes through his chest, it bursts out the back, it kills the next goblin. For me, I just sort of feel like I just kind of do those things ad hoc rather than relying on a specific mechanic,
I don't like that. I like when the game tells you when you get a maneuver, because that feels fair to me, right? If a player is like,
I do too.
What if the guy after him goes and he's like, I threw my spear and I impaled 3 guys, and you're like, wait, hold on.
Well, but that's just the thing, is that I agree with you. The difference is who does it. So it's not something that's being generated by the player. It's something that's being generated by me as the GM. And it's because it's very specifically because I don't, it sounds terrible. I don't respect the rules of that game, like in a way that I feel like they matter, so I can just kind of go off the cuff. And so it's sort of my way of, the player got to add their element through whatever their action there was and their really cool thing. And it's kind of like me taking a GM move, even when the player rolls well. So another thing about PBTA, which we haven't talked about, is like, that's why I hate that they call it a miss. So for example, you're going, let's say your character, and we're playing Dungeon World, right? And you go wading into a group of kobolds, and and you're like, yeah, I'm going in. I'm like, they bring up their daggers feebly, and you're like, yeah, I'm swinging in with my horse. And I go, yeah, roll hack and slash, and you roll hack and slash, and you roll a 4, which is a 6 or less is a miss. I get to make as hard of a move as I want, and my hard move might be you slaughter several kobolds, but your sword gets goes straight through the chest of the last one. And the creature falls back, slump dead, and your sword is stuck to the hilt in its chest. And you missed, but I got to take the discretion as the GM to kill these kobolds and put you in a new spot, a new difficult situation. That was sort of my prerogative.
Yeah.
And again, it's not for everybody, but my point is that like it gives me that sort of narrative control to sort of tweak how the game is, because it's not a tactical game, right? It's not a tactical game.
Right.
So that's kind of why I enjoy that. But in general, yeah, I mean, I guess I'm okay with the idea of Mighty Deeds. I mean, I like, high rolls should benefit from things. I don't, exactly, but
for me, the thing that I like about them is like the open-endedness, where the rules tell you when you get one, they don't tell you what it has to be.
Right. So I mean, so it's still kind of subject to GM fiat and bias.
It's because I get that it is subject to GM fiat, but it hits the right middle ground for me, because for you it seems like you enjoy it like either extreme, where you're like, okay, we're just playing by the rules, or I don't like, or you just get to like GM fiat, whenever you feel it's appropriate, which I also, I get the appeal of that.
Right. And the other thing too is I don't want to get so I don't want to get like so bogged down in endless rules minutia. So like an example might be like, I don't necessarily need a rule that we're fighting in these narrow rat tunnels against rat men, and you pull out your greatsword, and I go, you could barely use that thing here. I don't need a rule that tells me that.
Yeah, I agree. The games I've implemented, like what I'm talking about in, are mostly like 10 pages.
Right. But like, if somebody's wielding a greatsword and they're fighting in the temple of the rat, where it's a bit more open space where they can worship their rat gods, and the fighter with the greatsword rolls really well, I don't necessarily want or need a system that tells me that character goes apeshit and goes in a big swinging circle and hacks down a bunch of people. So for me, it's more about like feeling out the fiction, and I tend to game master those kind of games more like a director, or more like
that checks out,
like a movie director rather than a game master, if that makes any sense.
So. There's a house rule that I haven't gotten to try out yet, but that I've wanted to ever since I got all on board the auto hit train. I love auto hit. I hate fucking missed attacks. I've been a little like annoyed by like the OSR games I'm still running, and so a house rule that I haven't gotten to try yet, but I want to implement is when you miss, you can choose to do half damage. But that allows the enemy to that gives the enemy a chance to do a maneuver against you, which is just any, non-attack.
Yep. I mean, that's very similar to the way I run most of my Dungeon World combats. Yeah. So, no, but again, it's me viewing the game through the lens of when I'm playing a Dungeon World game, I am not trying to give my players a tactical board game experience, right? Yeah. Nor am I trying to give them a deep simulationist combat as war experience, right? I'm trying to give them an action-packed, pulse-pounding, dungeon crawling experience that is, 30% Caves of Chaos, 60% Raiders of the Lost Ark, 10% Conan the Barbarian, right? Like that's like somewhere in the neighborhood I'm trying to give them. And I find that the rules there really support me to doing that, in that they are very flexible, but also the rules are very draconian in Powered by the Apocalypse, which is to say that, the rules tell me when I can and can't do something. And some GMs really don't like that either. So, anyways, overall, I would say I like that. But anyways, I don't like rolling spells, so I agree with you there. And especially if they're like slot based or like the resource dependent based, I don't like that. Like Forbidden Lands magic was absurdly powerful in Forbidden Lands because it automatically worked and there was no save. So if you had there's a spell like that the blood mages have that just does like 1 point of damage for every point of power you put in the spell, and you just target somebody and say, I'm spending 5 points of damage, and like the most hit points a character could have is like 5. They just take 5 points of damage. So it's like really, really, really powerful. And obviously the danger is that if you roll, if you roll multiple 6s or something, you put too much power in the spell. And now you have to roll on the spell mishap table. I'm okay with that to a certain extent.
What game is this?
Forbidden Lands from Free League.
Okay.
We did a couple of streams on it. So, but the other nice thing is that when you do go to 0 in that game, hit points, you're not dead. You're temporarily knocked unconscious, but then you roll on a D66 table to find out what happens to you. Because you only die usually on a 66. So most of the time something else happens to him.
Really, really lenient death and dismemberment table, basically.
Yeah, and to be clear, the first time somebody with Tim Carpenter from our channel, who was in chat earlier, the very first time they encountered a group of orcs, and the orcs were like, "We're starving, we're hungry. We just give us all your food and water, and we'll let you live." And the group was like, "Well, no." And the orcs are like, "Well, then we're gonna take it from your dead bodies." And they engaged in combat. And the very first person to get reduced to 0, Tim, I was like, "All right, Tim, roll double six." He rolled double sixes. he got his head cut off by an orc. It was great. Yeah, sad time. And then Left 4 Dead, they looted him. Left 4 Dead, Bob's character came to consciousness like hours later. Because in that game, Forbidden Lands, you have to fail an empathy check to coup de grace somebody. Basically,
I like that mechanic.
Yes. So basically, the default assumption is that you don't go around murdering people. And in fact, if you want to, you have to fail. If your character has a high empathy score, you will be very unlikely to be able to kill somebody. There's actually a talent you could take called Cold Blooded that lets you bypass that.
Skips that.
Yeah.
But I like that. I like. I don't like combatants dying most of the time, unless it's just like a mindless monster anyway.
Sure. Yeah, and by the way, yes, you can kill a mindless. Like if it's not a person, if it's like a beast or a thing, you can coup de grace.
I like when, like, if you're fighting a person, that leads to more like social stuff after the fight is over.
Sure. But speaking of beasts, Bob's character woke up, stripped basically of all of his belongings hours later, wandered around, tried to find the other party members, encountered a bear, and Bob tried to like melee. Bob tried to go hand to hand with like a bear, and it just ripped him to pieces. And then Bob was like, okay, we'll roll the D66. And I was like, it doesn't matter, Bob. I mean, you're unconscious either way. It's a bear. He doesn't have to fail an empathy check.
One more stat block, and it's the bear.
All right. We're going back to the bear real quick. He just eats you, Bob. It's like there's no rolling for this. Bear, bearded, large bear. Ooh, it's got the danger. Right? It's just because it's nasty or something.
Where is? I swear it said somewhere in here that like, oh yeah, this thing will kill anyone it downs if it like is given the chance. Why isn't it? Maybe I moved it into like the just like the general beast tactics.
They'll often try and take felled party members to their lairs to eat rather than fight to the death.
Okay.
Yeah. So lazy, grumpy, territorial, often napping. Bear claws, two of them, 6 damage twice, and then lunging
maw.
It's
the only monster that gets multiple attacks. I feel like it should. It's a bear.
Tundalus says, I run up the claw. Exactly, Tundalus. Bob tried to run up the claw, and I mean, it's not even close to how badly. I mean, you would have been hard. Bob would have been hard. Bob would have been hard fought to kill the bear with his bow from a distance. But he probably would have succeeded because he was a pretty good hunter. But Bob had no. It's not like Bob didn't have a bow. Bob didn't have a weapon. He was literally
he didn't have anything.
He was literally fighting it with his fists, and the bear ripped him to pieces. I
really like making regular animals like kind of really scary. Because I think that does a lot to like sell like a more grounded tone where it's like, oh yeah, you're not really supposed to be like, maybe you're a hero, but you're not fighting like cosmic threats that eat planets. You're still like someone who might lose a fight trying to solo a bear. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, again, we're fostering. I've had dogs my whole life, but they've always been like 30, 40 pounds. We're fostering this pit mix, whatever. It's close to 80 pounds. And I've taken it for walks and stuff like that. And I weigh 3 times that. I weigh 240, and I'm like, and I'm 6'2", and I'm like, man, this thing's scary. I can't even imagine what a bear or a lion or whatever would be like. So
the other day I was watching some of the so I'm like, oh, here's some prehistoric animals. That's like, oh, it's just a crocodile the size of like a bus.
Right. And that's why imagine a bear, but then make it like magical and somehow even more strong. And that's like most monsters in D&D, we're just sitting there just like fighting them with stuff. And anyways, all right. Well, it's closer to 11. So we went way over, but this was a lot of fun.
I had fun.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. So for starters, I want to thank Ben Asaro from our Patreon chat. I want to thank Sunhawk for the awesome tips that kind of got us here today. Also, big shout out to a whole mess of people: Tundalus, Sean, Chase, Sunhawk, Sam, all who super chatted and tipped tonight to support this support this show. So thank you so much for that, and thank you, Ben, for the initial chip. But then huge shout out to Level 2 Janitor for coming on and sharing with us their process for making this game. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.
And again, I highly encourage you. Link in the description below. Go check it out. You also have a couple other games.
I do. Mostly OSR games.
But there's a bunch of games there. It's itch.io. You know me. I always say support creators. This is how we get it done. So you're paying. I mean, this is 160 pages in the core rulebook plus a 50-page bestiary, plus more updates are coming. You can afford to drop. You can afford to drop a couple bucks.
I'll have something that costs money eventually. Probably like an adventure.
You can afford to. You can afford to to drop a couple bucks is what I say. So
I
definitely check it
I
out.
just want people to play the fucking thing.
As well they should after they pay money for the privilege to do so. This is us supporting creators. This is us.
Pay me money if you like it.
Hey, you saw enough tonight. If you're watching this after 4 hours, you definitely should pay. Any case, check it out either way. Share it with your friends, share it with your people, talk about it. I think this is a really cool game, and I love
so much.
I love 4th edition D&D, but it needs revision, it needs refinement, and I love watching people like Tundalus and their take with Trespasser and Janitor with their take on Tactiquest. And I love seeing people iterate on it, because I know that the GSL kind of buried it in the depths, and it never got its fair shake to really, a lot of people have embraced these tactical games. Pathfinder 2 has, but Pathfinder 2, I think in some ways went the wrong direction with it, which was too hyper-focused on the combat as sport and too hyper-focused on making everything super balanced, super tight. I think there's a space where you can have this kind of, OSR style and still have a very crunchy tactical game in place.
I respect Pathfinder 2 a lot more than I want to play it.
And that's a fair take, and that's a fair assessment. I still respect the hell out of the game. It'll be.
I think I only put up with how crunchy Tactiquest is because I wrote it, so I don't have to bother looking through all the rules.
Right. At the end of the day, I like a lot of RPGs for a lot of different reasons. We're playing Torchbearer. We're having a blast, which has been a lot of fun. And
I do want to ask, how crunchy does this game seem to you? Because I was going for lightweight, but it kind of got out of hand.
It's not light. It's not lightweight. It's not heavyweight though. It's medium weight.
Okay.
There's enough.
Hopefully, what I was.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to put it on a score, I would say probably 5. Literally, it's probably it depending on what class you took and what perks you took, I could see it maybe leaning more towards a 4. And then
that's true. There's probably a couple classes. I think there's one class here. I think Necromancer is twice as long as any other class.
Yeah, so I could see that, but it's gonna. I'll tell you this: it's gonna run really quick. It's gonna run fast. Just from the fact that you are avoiding all these.
Oh man, the not having dice goes so far. You lose a lot, not having dice.
Absolutely.
But you gain half-hour combats that are really fun.
Right, exactly, which is really awesome.
I've had combats in my OSR campaigns that last as long as Tactiquest combats, because even when the rules are simple and clean and fast, it's the missed attacks. They just add so much. Draw Steel is in the inspirations here. It's there because I like auto hit. And because Draw Steel rewired my brain when I played it, and I was like, oh, I love auto hit. I love not having these superfluous random missed attacks. And that's the main reason it's in the inspirations. I don't really like that much else about Draw Steel.
Fair enough. Awesome. Well, thank you again, Level 2 Janet, for being on. And of course, if you want to hang out and talk about this game, maybe you should join Night's Last Call and talk with us there. We have a Patreon where we have a lot of folks creating games, talking about games, running games, and Level 2 Janitor is just one of those fine folks. But a lot of
it's a good community.
Yeah, we're a little niche at times. We can be a little argumentative. We challenge people. We try to avoid groupthink and echo chambers. Not every game is for every person. And not every game's for every person, and when we're okay with that. So, but we're here.
People in that server have takes that I cannot imagine having in a million lifetimes, and it's great.
Right. We have a diversity of thought, and I try to encourage that. So, yes, that's well said, Cal. KLC is an echo chamber of disagreement. It does feel like sometimes people, not to be trolls, but sometimes people agree. Just play devil's advocate just to keep the conversation going. So thank you everybody for hanging out. Thank you to our supporters. Thank you to our patrons, and thank you to Level 2 Janitor, who is all of those things, for joining me today. Much. And again, check it out. Level 2 Janitor, on itch.io. Check out Tactiquest.
Link in the description.
Link in the description below. All right. Well, thanks to everybody, and we'll see you next time on Nights of Last Call. Peace.